Hi, everybody, and welcome to the British Women's Championship. We are round 2, and we're going to be following all the games. First of all, let's share the live stream. This is the Women in Action, and so lovely, spacious conditions. And let's also see the moves. Okay, so we are starting on board 1, which is Zoe Varney against Harriet Hunt. Peter, if you can scroll up actually slightly.
Okay, yes. It's also it's a little hidden on the left-hand side. Never mind. Let's see. Okay, so I'll just go back to the opening moves. This is an accelerated dragon from Harriet Hunt, and I must admit I didn't know that was in her repertoire. It's quite interesting to me, this, because I've worked with Harriet quite a lot over the years and got some idea which opening she plays, and she's been an avid player of the Sicilian. She's been a serious Sicilian player for many years, but of course she plays a lot less chess now. She's a little bit probably less confident about going into heavily theoretical openings than she would have been at one time, and
well, if it's a surprise to you, Peter, it'll probably also be a surprise to Zoe.
I think that's highly probable. Yes, I mean, Harriet back in her sort of when she was a very active player, played a lot of Najdorf Sicilians, that kind of thing. And actually, last year in the when she was playing for England in the online Olympiad, I mean, she's made several sort of mini comebacks, and one of them was playing pretty decent chess last year in the online Olympiad.
Yes, yes, I was on the Zoom calls with that, as I was like deputy captain, and she was she had some lovely games.
She did indeed, and she back then she'd started playing e4 e5 actually, and now she's obviously gone for a Sicilian, but for a slightly less theoretically demanding one perhaps. And interestingly, this may well turn into a similar opening to the one which was seen yesterday. Keta van Argemir Grant played a similar by a different move order, but she ended up basically in an accelerated dragon as well. So it seems to be something which the top players here are happy to play.
The other thing is that Zoe's very theoretical and knows her openings to many moves. I think, and so Harriet might have been trying to avoid some of Zoe's prep.
Yeah, that's quite possible too. Personally, here I think Queen takes d4 is a critical way of sort of testing Black's move order. So one of the reasons that people will play the accelerated dragon with knight c6 rather than g6 will be that it avoids obviously Queen takes d4 variations, but then you have to reckon with White not playing open Sicilians but playing something like 3 bishop b5. So all of these, most of these opening sequences involve some kind of trade-offs, and a little bit of kind of what people like to get and what they want to avoid is always going on somewhere in the background. But Zoe didn't test that bit of it. She played knight takes d4, which is obviously a perfectly reasonable way of going as well. Bishop knight c6. Okay, then Harriet. So having established that it's going to be an open Sicilian, Harriet goes back and reaches the position which she would have effectively reached had she played 2 knight c6. And now the big question in these positions is White going to play in a sort of typical open Sicilian style, knight c3, bishop e3, possibly bishop c4, that kind of thing, or is White going to set up a Maroczy bind by playing the pawn to c4? That's usually the big decision. And Black's move order here is usually, there are various different move order tricks and ideas. They're mostly designed to avoid it ending up as a straight dragon. This is usually played by players with the black pieces who don't want to have spent hours and hours and hundreds of hours poring over how not to get mated in a Yugoslav attack. So bishop e3, that's an interesting move because it actually doesn't, it does pretty much commit White to playing without c4. If Black opted for knight c6 now, knight f6 I mean, sorry, then I think that would mean White would have to play without the pawn on c4. It would be interesting to see whether Harriet is.
Well, how would you? So you because White could do bishop d3 or f3 to defend that e pawn, or would White just defend with a knight?
I think after knight f6, white's just going knight c3. I think f3 is possible, but you've always got to look out for the possibility that black can suddenly play d5. I mean, one of the great virtues of the accelerated dragon is the accelerated d pawn. You can try and get the d pawn to d5 in one move rather than two. I mean, I'd need to have a little think about that position to see whether it works after knight f6, f3. But I'm pretty sure bishop e3 is... I'm not sure what she's trying to gain by the bishop e3 move order, but I'm pretty sure it's a declaration of intent that c4 isn't, high on the agenda anymore. So bishop g7. Okay, so that gives white an extra possibility to play c4 if she wants to. So if she wants to... But c4 is, the Moxie bind at one time was a very, very sort of feared thing because these two pawns... Two pawns on e4 and c4 really hold black's pawn breaks up to quite an extent. But on the other hand, white has to be comfortable playing with a bishop, a light squared bishop, which is blocked behind pawns and that sort of thing. So there are advantages and disadvantages as there are in most of these.
Yeah, I guess it's a style thing, and whether Zoe would likes that kind of bind position or not.
Yes, it is, and. I mean, I think of Harriet as a very active player in general, and how comfortable she would be in that sort of thing isn't so obvious to me. But obviously, she's decided that she's happy to play this. And I must admit, this is an opening I've toyed with playing now and again, and I've sort of, well, apart from the fact that I think there are a few lines which are quite dangerous for black, I sort of at one time had the idea that it's not that easy to play for a win if white just plays reasonably well, kind of thing. There are relatively safe options for white.
Yeah.
But I've come to the view that maybe that's a bit pessimistic. And you see a lot of games where black, it's very trendy. Well, we'll see how white plays this first before I go into detail. But yes, as I said, bishop e3 is almost certainly a declaration. She's going to do this without playing c4. Knight f6. So I need to remind myself why white can't take on c6 and go e5 here. There's one position where you can play knight takes c6, b takes, and then after e5 you can actually sacrifice a pawn with knight d5.
Oh.
I think this might be it. But I'm pretty sure this is it.
So this could be a pawn sack for black.
It could be, but I've got a feeling that white tends not to play that.
Yeah.
That it's a pawn sack with quite a good reputation, I think, because black comes straight to the b file, and then the e pawn is. Shall I just show that very quickly? I mean, this is all me trying to remember things. It's possible. I might be wrong here. It's possible that knight g8 is also reckoned to be a decent move because then white is pushing the center pawns in a way which doesn't really fit with their original plan. But in this position with rook b8. The rook there's already open files on the queen side, 2 of them, so the white king isn't headed there probably, and black can follow up with a little bit of pressure. But I mean, I'm not confident in my recollection of this.
Yeah,
but it looks like some sort of decent compensation for a pawn to me.
Yeah, or you might have created a new line.
Black will break with d6 perhaps at some point after queen c7 and castles or something, and then there's going to be more time won against white's queen, and after d6, if the white pawn has to take, then the bishop on g7 and the rook on b8 are then sort of working very well together to bear down on b2. I don't remember the details. I just have a feeling this isn't what white tends to do.
Yep.
However, she'll probably do it if I say that. Yeah.
Oh, she has. She's taken.
No, that's my move.
Oh, that's yours.
That was my move.
I was thinking that was a...
Yeah, okay. So how do we get back to the moves? Oh,
no, I think she has. I'll check on my machine.
It's also possible she hasn't moved yet, which is why.
Oh, no. It's looking on mine. It's looking like she hasn't moved.
Yeah, I think she probably hasn't moved. No, I think that said my moves. My silly moves appeared on the screen rather than hers. So, okay. So anyway, an accelerated dragon. I think it will be interesting enough, this one, and it would also be, if Harriet has prepared this as a surprise, it would be good to see how well prepared Zoe is when she's kind of caught possibly a little by surprise. So, okay, shall we have a quick look at?
Yeah, let's look at
another very big clash
Yes.
have as early
It's
as
really exciting, you know, round 2, but it's really exciting games already.
I was very pleased to see, you know, that there were 2 really big clashes on the top boards already by round 2.
Yeah.
And here is the other one. So Ketavan Arakamir Grant, who is a grandmaster.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Katarzyna Toma, who, do you know how many years Katarzyna's been playing for England? I was trying to remember, but
I don't exactly, but quite a few now.
yeah, it's quite a few, isn't it? And she's put in some pretty good performances in online Olympiads and
She has, and also like in things like the Foreign CL, she was quite regularly holding her own against all sorts of title players like IAMs and stuff.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was a little bit surprised by this opening as well, to be honest. This is a sort of closed Philidor.
Nice.
And my recollection of her is that she's primarily a Sicilian player. And again, like Harriet, has a sort of history of some fairly theoretical and interesting Sicilians. And she's obviously decided to go quite solid today.
It's actually, it's very interesting, the prep for this tournament, because you know it's quite a small field, so you I guess all the players have a pretty good idea in advance of who they're going to be playing, so they will have a little bit of time, will have had a little bit of time over the last few weeks to do specific prep for opponents.
Yes, no, I think, you know, who was going to be here has been available online, you know, for some weeks, I think.
Yeah,
so the possibility's been there to do some quite specific preparation, and it looks on the face of it as if people have been taking advantage of that.
Yes.
So Ketavan is a long-term E4 player with a pretty serious theoretical repertoire with E4. I'm trying to think. I think my most recent game against Ketty was pretty horrible. I remember being sort of, I mean, I managed to draw in the end, but I remember being sort of thoroughly outplayed for some moves in the middle and really getting a little taste of her class. I mean,
yeah,
she's a few years younger than me, I think, but she's already at the point where, you know, I think she's already at the age where people are usually trying to keep up with the sort of their very best period of chess. It's and you know, she obviously has a lot of other things going on in her life. It's I think that when she was at her peak, she put in some amazing performance. I remember one of the European individual women's championships where she was right at the head of the field for several rounds. Absolutely.
Oh no, I mean, she's a really strong player, and we followed some of her games before when she was playing online. There was the British Online Championships, and she played actually both the 2020 and the 2021, and she won it outright, I think, in 2021, and she was joint with Akshire in the other one, but she played some really lovely games in the. I was particularly commenting on that first one when she won the event, and some very classy, like where she had things just under control throughout the game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I felt with when she was outplaying me for those moves. There was a sort of, it was like
knows what she's doing.
It's how it used to feel when being sort of positionally outplayed by kind of old Soviet school grandmasters. There was a bit of that going on, and of course, you know, Ketty had her early years in the Soviet period. She's old enough to have sort of Soviet chess upbringing, and believe me, when I was under pressure in that game, it really showed. Yes, so this is a Philidor defense. It's interesting because a lot of the time these days, you'll find that people trying to play the Philidor with black decide to go about it kind of indirectly. This move order where you just go e4, e5, knight f3, d6 seems to me, and I mean, people could well check databases and say that I'm simply wrong, but it seems to me that this is more common when people are planning to take on d4 in some position. And actually, for playing particularly after d4, some people now play knight f6, but that gives white the option of playing a sort of simplified position with d takes e5, knight takes e4, which A, isn't necessarily to black's taste, and B, might be very slightly better for white anyway.
Yeah.
So this move order's a little bit unusual, and she denied white that possibility. She played knight d7, but this sort of requires a few very sort of accurate moves to even get a solid position with black. So after white plays bishop c4, there were various tricks, like you can't play knight f6 quickly. I think c6 is also fought with danger. You know, there are various moves here which are fought with danger. And black play. Oh, sorry, c6. Sorry, maybe it's c6 you have to play. Bishop e7. I think, for example, is it right that bishop e7 can be met by takes and a quick knight g5, bishop takes, and queen h5, something like that?
Okay.
I think something like that simply gives black a sort of depressing position without much to you know, compensate for being a little bit worse. So I think this
because bishop e7 really looks like you're being very safe, doesn't it?
Bishop e7 looks like your safe option, but I'm just trying to remember in my mind why after pawn take, why knight takes is such a bad move. Then I think you just win a pawn. Yeah, then you can take on e5 and queen h5, and that's a pawn dropping. And you know, black has to play e6, so it's not a pawn dropping under particularly pleasant circumstances either. And I think, yeah, the less obvious one is that pawn takes, knight g5. Oh, they're really unimpressed. Oh, wait a minute, maybe this. Sorry, this is the queen d5 one.
Queen d5.
This is none of your winning the two bishops. This is your delivering checkmate one. That's right.
Yeah, that's
so
really scary.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary. So the move order she played is probably the move order she has to play. And I can't remember if there's still a move here which puts people off this move order. I mean, can I just go back?
What do you take now on e5 for white?
Well, then black
just recaptures with the pawn, and
black will certainly need to take back with the pawn, because otherwise there will be a knight takes e5 and bishop takes f7 check.
Yeah,
which would be another way to go down. So pawn takes, and now, yeah, the only question would be if there was some knight g5.
Knight g5.
Looks like it forces knight h6.
Knight g5, then you'd have to knight h6.
I think so, but
maybe that's just okay.
That may be okay, although, you know, you could imagine that
queen f3.
This is stuff I ought to know. I'm now having my memory tested publicly. It's never good.
Sorry. How rude of me. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hi, Ocelot.
I'm trying to remember why all this is kind of. I mean, just to go back to what I said at the beginning, the more common thing it seems to me these days is that after e4, if black wants to play the Philidor, they tend to go start as if they were going to play a Pitts, and then after knight c3, play e5 now.
Okay.
Or even if, well, there are two versions. One is they play e5 now, and that, of course, gives white the extra option of taking e5 and exchanging queens. But I think there's a lot of evidence that if black knows their stuff, that's relatively harmless. And actually, there are some, you know, I can think of some nice games where black played to win in that line. I don't think that line's a huge problem. So that would probably be, if I was doing it, that would probably be my preferred option. The other one is to go knight bd7, but that gives white the option of playing very sharply with f4, and there might be quite good independent reasons to avoid that one. Although black can still play e5, and this is quite an interesting, and you know, it depends. If people are looking for unexplored openings, this isn't. I mean, it's not unknown, but it's not as heavily explored as some openings, and there's some interesting territory potentially here. But she's gone very sort of with a straight bat, as Luke was saying, playing so e4, e5, and so on.
Yeah.
So if I can recover the moves from the game. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, that explains why c6 is quite an important move order. But Ketavan, I get the impression Ketavan has a position she's keen to set up, and she wants to reach it. And you know, given that black hasn't blundered in the move order, she's going to just get on and get there. So I wonder.
So what about now? Your trick with.
Well,
now you've set me off just looking for tricks.
Well, exactly. You see how exciting it is. Now, it's not so clear to me that
the line with knight g5.
Yeah, I just wonder whether black can go knight h6 after knight g5 now or something.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, more to the point. I think now, no, that's not more to the point. No, I don't know. It's there must be a good reason. we could see.
Mm.
I mean, so as far as I can see, knight takes, queen h5 is still winning a pawn. So I assume pawn takes.
Yeah.
And then let's just see, knight g5. Oh, the engine quite liked it. It's possible now that we can go knight h6, whereas we couldn't before. Oh, no, the engine's not impressed by that either.
The engine does not like that.
No. I mean, with the pawn on c7, I should have said, actually, with the pawn on c7, knight h6 always fails to bishop takes f7 check, knight takes, and then knight e6, trapping the queen.
Oh, yeah.
An additional problem for black to worry about. But
gosh, there's so much.
I mean, I don't want to create the impression this is not a playable opening. This is regarded as a perfectly playable opening. It's a little bit treacherous getting to the positions you want. But I need to remember, what exactly black's supposed to do here. I mean, obviously the baseline is you can always play bishop takes, queen g5, queen h5, and then I think black has to go g6, queen takes, and basically you're playing a bishop position where white has the bishop pair, and it's not obvious to me what black has in return.
No, you'd want to be white, wouldn't you, in this?
I would want to be white, yeah. So I don't know. I think that's something I may need to look up afterwards. But certainly there are these possibilities. And if you're playing black in this line, you need to know these move orders absolutely inside out to make sure no nasty things happen. But okay.
I'd imagine Kata would know these inside out.
I imagine she...
I'm just making that up, but I imagine she would.
Oh, I imagine both players would have known. Yeah. Katarzyna will know this completely inside out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And once upon a time, I probably did. But you see how
true.
How memory and age don't engage together in a very
hi, Uncienda.
In a very attractive manner. Okay, so
unseen.
So given that you're not doing any of those sort of things, White's setup is probably to play a4 to cut out b5 and then to develop with knight c3, and then there are choices between putting queen on e2 and rook on d1 or just rook on e1. So let's see how she goes about it.
Nice, isn't it, to have for white an opening with like a lot of tricks, but also that's good positionally.
Well, but the thing is, if you don't go down the line with the tricks, then well, I mean, these positions are... I'd rather be white in these positions. I've never been I think I played one Philidor in my whole life, and that was an open one. I've never been very tempted to do these with black, but I can see the appeal, because I think if white doesn't get it right, then black sort of, it's a bit like the same appeal. I don't think the opening is theoretically quite as good as these became, but it's a bit like the appeal with the hedgehog, where you sort of set up this position where you can sort of reorganize your pieces behind the lines and then try and break out at a moment of your choosing. And if white doesn't get it right, that kind of strategy can be quite attractive. And there are loads of games where the hedgehog, for example, worked very well for black. And if you look at the way white plays the hedgehog these days, a lot of the time they try to find quite concrete solutions which don't allow black to do that sort of thing. The Philidor, I think white is happier to play the sort of maneuvering behind the lines thing in the Philidor, but we'll see what kind of ideas she comes up with. But
the crowd likes white's position. White has the centre, more developed, and is castled.
A5 is interesting because it's sort of I mean, there are some lines where white wants to slightly put the clamp on black by playing A5 herself.
Yeah,
but that's also a double-edged sword. So let's just say here, if black played, for example, castles and then queen c7, if white plays a5, although it looks like it's making b5 much less likely to happen, if black plays rook b8 and then plays b5, and after white takes on b6, takes back with a pawn, it actually enables b5 to happen sometime in the future in a way that it might not if the pawn had stayed on a4. Do you see what I mean? So it's, it's not... A5 is... I'm not sure what I think about A5. I'm sure it's just there are different ways of playing black's position. I'm sure that's a system. I mean, the way I would like to play black if it really worked is to kind of play queen to c7 and then pawns to maybe b6, a6, all of those things, bishop to b7, and then eventually break out with b5.
In some of the computer chess games, the white will play this pawn up to a5, a6, and then doesn't worry too much if it ends up
off.
giving it away.
Well,
Just gets
is
the
that, when you say the computer game, is that mainly AlphaZero, or is that others?
This was the AlphaZero and those type, yeah.
AlphaZero doesn't seem to get too doesn't seem to fret too much about the old rook pawn dropping off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so a5 loses some ideas for black. So it loses this a6 and b5 idea. On the other hand, it takes away the idea of white playing a5, and it does secure this quite nice square on b4. I just managed to get a little dot to arrive there for a moment. The b4 square for black to use later on, perhaps. But of course, there are no really disastrously weak squares yet. The only square which can't be sort of covered at some point is black's b6 square. And actually, I don't think black needs to worry too much about that one. But, you know, as in so many chess openings, how to develop the c8 bishop for black is going to be one of the key variables in whether black gets a position you'd want to play or not. But, you know, when I said that black is looking for long-term breakout, white also has to always pay attention to... I tend to find myself looking too hard at it and spend too much time on the clock. E takes d4. You always have to check that black isn't springing out quickly with e takes d4 whenever you put your pieces on slightly less natural squares. So there's a lot to look out for. I think these positions are quite complex and not that easy to play, which may well be attractive to both players.
Yeah, and it should give us an interesting game.
I find it quite interesting, the Philidor.
Yeah, I like these.
I don't think I've ever really mastered it, but
yeah.
I have. You know, I find it intriguing.
Yeah.
Well, Philidor's one of the great chess thinkers, isn't he? It really was.
Yeah. Pawns are the soul of chess.
Hundreds of years ahead of his time in his understanding of pawns in particular. And this is an opening which, you know, it's all about structure. It's all about the pawns. I mean, in the original version, they used to play it with a very quick f5 for black, but I think that's one of those fashions that really did deserve to.
Oh no, I do sometimes with that, and well, not. I mean, like castle first, and.
Well, I think they used to, I mean, obviously in the original version, on the position after 3d4, black would play f5.
Yeah, no, that is
fraught with danger.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, white kind of, to really punish it, white needs to know their stuff as well. And I imagine there's a lot of people out there playing 1e4 who haven't really haven't spent a lot of time on 3f5 in the Philidor.
I can imagine Ketty would not mind facing that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't play that against Ketty.
No, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I mean, one of the sort of prophylactic measures white can take against some of these attempts by black to break out is to make sure, for example, that if black has a breakout with d5, it's not going to attack the bishop. White has time here to put pieces on relatively secure squares, and I think bishop a2 is part of that process. I mean, it looks a little bit odd blocking the rook in a way, but on the other hand, if you put it on b3, you're always going to be vulnerable to e takes d4 and knight c5 hitting it, that kind of thing. So a2 is actually, you know, it scores highly in terms of security of the piece, I think. So castles, presumably. And now, yeah, as I said, white has choices between playing queen e2 and rook d1, or just playing rook e1. One of the things to watch out for is whether white's I mean, there's this lovely tension in the center which can resolve in various different ways. If you take on e5, you run the risk of giving black a little bit more control of some of the dark squares. For example, that b4 square I mentioned, also c5.
Yeah.
If you keep the tension and play things like bishop g5, that can lead to its own quite complex things. The other thing white sometimes does, particularly when black plays d6, is to try to play d5 with the right timing. And you can imagine if you get then exchanges on the d5 square, you're going to end up with something that looks more like a Sicilian structure than an e4, e5. Do you see what I mean?
So you'd kind of... You'd want to make sure, though, that your bishop still has scope, wouldn't you?
I think when you go d5, if exchanges happen on d5, the bishop's likely to be exchanged off. What you're aiming for is something like a kind of where black has a bad Sicilian, where they're left with a bad bishop on e7.
I see what you mean.
And you get control of the square on d5. It's sort of...
Yes.
White tries to make it look like a sort of Sveshnikov Sicilian gone badly wrong. That's one strategy.
Oh, interesting, yes.
Well, there's a lot of e4, e5. I mean, in the Spanish as well, there's a lot of lines in the sort of... Yeah, mainline Spanish is Zaitsev, closed Sicilians, where basically white often ends up aiming for a Sicilian structure where, you know, on a good day, black doesn't have as much counterplay as they would have in the Sveshnikov or something like that. Okay, so let's see what Yeah, she went for the rook e1 option.
Yeah.
And I think the rook e1 option is safer in terms of avoiding e takes d4s, which are promising for black. h6. Okay, well, that shows a measure of respect for the bishop g5 option.
Yeah.
It also, obviously, that's a useful move in the kind of Sveshnikov type positions. If white goes for the thing where there might be a weak square on d5, then as in the Sveshnikov, it can be useful to play h6 to stop people exchanging off a knight, which might be fighting for it. The only worry with that square is, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen immediately or that it would be good immediately. But now black has, in addition to everything else, to keep her eye on the possibility of knight h4 coming either to f5 or to g6.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and h6 then means you can't really get rid of it.
H6 weakens the g4 square a little bit, and with that bishop on a2, that's not just an academic thing, it's got possible consequences. So h6 is, I mean, I assume this is going to still be part of her preparation, and maybe she just wants to play rook e8 and bishop f8.
Yeah.
You know, very much as you might in the Spanish, and as in the Spanish, to do that, you may well need the move h6. Again, if you think in terms of Spanish comparisons, if you know about the Breyer variation in the Spanish, where the black plays all these developing moves and then suddenly plays the undeveloping knight from c6 to b8 in order to go to d7.
But she's already got it on d7.
Black's kind of trying to do that with a couple of extra tempi.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there are other concessions along the way, for example, which don't make that, you know, it's not a simple black's going to get a Breyer with a couple of extra tempi. But you see that's the same sort of thinking that underlines this, I think. Okay, so h3, yeah, that's a much better move than knight h4. I was just illustrating a new possibility. I don't think knight h4 is a good move yet. Presumably now queen c7 looks like the tidy move. No, rook e8, sorry. Okay,
so she's doing
that's probably more, that's priority, I think, yes. So obviously you see h6 is necessary now, otherwise knight g5 would be a real issue. Bishop e3, I mean, they're playing at a decent tempo as well. At least faster than the commentary team can keep up. Bishop f8, I would be strongly expecting. Oh, now she's stopped. So is there anything about bishop e3 which might put her off bishop f8, I wonder?
Do you mean in terms of taking on e5 or something?
No, I don't really mean in terms of anything. I just mean in terms. I don't know exactly when the moves will play. Okay, queen c7. There you go. Maybe there's some. So yeah. So her setup will be bishop to f8 next, I think, and then there will be a question of where she develops the bishop on c8. And as I said, we always need to look at, or white always needs to look out a little bit for whether e takes d4 is ever a good move. But I don't sense at the moment that black's pieces are particularly well geared up for it. And, you know, if black plays b6 to develop the bishop, that's when I think that d5 idea comes into play.
Yes.
So those are a few things to look for. It's an interesting, rich position. I sort of think that if you have to play h6, then it makes me more enthusiastic about white's position than if black doesn't have to play h6. But to get the setup she's aiming for, she clearly needed it. So, you know, I mean, I think in general I'd slightly rather be white here, but I remember I lost a bad game against the Philidor once, which increased my already reasonable level of respect for it. It's easy to go wrong with white. So. Okay, a very interesting position.
Yes.
Let's just
take
a look. Let's take a look at what's going on the other boards.
Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one. Lindsay against Audrey.
Yes.
So Audrey, you might have seen, she played in the recent online Olympiad as well.
Indeed, yes, that's right.
Yes.
And
she got quite a good win for one of those games. Yeah.
And her opponent is pretty young, yes?
I think so. Let me just check. I'll check that in the background.
I mean, not one of the very young ones, but I think she's kind of...
I think she's young, yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right.
Well, I think she had good results in one of the... Maybe the Terra final, I think?
Okay.
Something like that?
Yeah.
And... Okay, so let's see how they got this position. It looks... I mean, structurally, it's an exchange Caro-Kann, I would expect. Bishop b5 check, that's interesting. Okay, let's go back and take a look at how they got here, and then we'll take a look at the position they have. So e4, c6. There's a lot of e4 going on in this tournament. This makes a... Well, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I like that. Yeah. No,
I'm not
because
sure how
it seems like most of
were
these.
last week, but when I was commentating, it was all d4s and knight f3s.
Yeah. No, I like to see some of these e4 games.
Yeah. e4, c6. I mean, I'm myself responsible for plenty of d4s and knight c3s, but I've always tried to mix it with the occasional e4 just to keep people guessing, or maybe to keep myself guessing. So d4, d5, e takes d5. So, I mean, so it used to be very popular to play the Panov attack with c4 here, but it seems to, I don't know, that seems to have declined in popularity somewhat in favour of other, if people play sharply against the Caro-Kann. The exchange variation itself, I think, still has a little bit of sting. The interesting thing about the structure here, it's basically an exchange Queen's Gambit in reverse in terms of the structure. And obviously white gets the option of putting her pieces on much more aggressive squares than can be done in the pure Queen's Gambit. There's no need, for example, to allow the pin on g4, although she may have ended up facing one anyway. But I think the most interesting way to play for white here is to avoid an early knight f3 and thereby avoid a pin on g4. And there are various ways of trying to do that. So c3 is the main line.
Yeah.
Queen
Lindsay
c7,
was born in 2008, by the way.
Right.
So, young player, yeah.
Well, definitely young to me. Okay, Queen c7, that's an interesting move. So I'm not sure why black feels the need to do it quite as early as this, but on the other hand, I'm not sure there's a big downside to it. One of the variations which really interests, the main line here is knight f6, and it may be that she has some idea that she wants to put the knight somewhere other than f6. After knight f6, one of the most interesting moves for white, I think, the main line is bishop f4, but I think one of the most interesting moves is to play h3. And basically, just as I was talking about in the Philidor, basically making it very clear that our strategy is about there being no good square for that bishop on c8. Do you see what I mean? Something like this, and h3. Yeah. And then white can just play very simply with knight f3, castles, bishop f4, and so on, without having to worry about a pin on g4. And there are some very interesting lines if black tries to play e5 immediately and take an isolated queen pawn, perhaps get the two bishops in compensation, but that's often the full extent of the compensation, I think. And these positions are interesting enough for white. So there are interesting ways to play this. h3 is one of the things I've noticed becoming a little bit more popular lately, and I think it's got a little bit of sting.
Yeah.
And one of the moves you could consider after h3 would be queen c7. That's what kind of reminded me of it. But she's gone for queen c7 earlier without even wanting to see h3 being on the board. So I think the situation is still the same. If white plays knight f3, then one of black's ideas is to pin with bishop g4.
Bishop g4, yeah.
And of course, the main thing about queen c7, she's trying to cut out the move bishop f4.
Yeah. So could white go knight e2 and then bishop f4 like that?
That may very well be what white did. That's certainly one of the logical ways. And, then you can also think about the fact that queen c7 might be quite an appropriate move to play if you're going to play e5 at some point. It's, there are other positions where black can play with the isolated queen pawn if white starts making any concessions. Otherwise, yeah, let's see how... So, she went knight f3. I think I like knight e2 a little bit better. I like the idea of threatening bishop f4 and just seeing what black's intending to do about that. Yes, I think knight e2 makes a lot of... black could still play bishop g4 against knight e2.
Yes.
And in some of these positions, even if you concede the bishop pair, as long as you can play knight f6, bishop d6 and develop. And then, if you've done all that, then maybe one of your ideas will be to exchange the dark square bishops so it's no longer a bishop pair as black. Bishop g4, I think, is a reasonable idea.
So you could even do knight e2.
Knight e2 is a reasonable idea, and bishop g4 is a possible reply. White can, of course, get bishop f4 in anyway by playing f3, kicking the bishop away, and then playing bishop f4. Okay, but f3 is always a slight positional concession, I suppose, with this kind of structure. So those are all interesting possibilities, but white just went knight f3. I think if I was black, I mean, this is far from a mistake, but I would be relatively pleased to see that, because then I know that my c8 bishop has a future.
Yes.
And there it is.
Bishop g4. And
there is that future.
Straight away. Yeah.
Okay, but on the other hand, white will get a choice of either this bishop will get exchanged off, or white will have the choice of driving it back a little bit, trying to make some time. So she drives it away, and it goes away. I mean, black is not unhappy to have to play bishop g6 in some position and trade light squared bishops like that either, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, because all those pawns are on, all of white's pawns are on dark squares in the center there.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very hesitant about calling the bishop on c1 a bad bishop, but I do think it's still true that solving the c8 bishop is one of black's main problems, and exchanging it off is a perfectly decent way of doing that.
Yeah.
So bishop g5, that's an interesting. I'm not quite sure what she's aiming at there, because okay, if black went knight f6, you could sort of take it off Trompovsky style, but
yes,
if black just plays e6 and bishop d6, which I assume was plan A anyway. Maybe she wants to go to h4 and g3 to hassle the queen, but as far as I can see, after e6, she doesn't have time to do that, because bishop h4 can be met by bishop d6.
Yes.
Let's see what she has in mind. I'm pretty sure e6. Yeah.
e6 has happened.
Knight d2, bishop d6. So black's setup is extremely logical. I think it makes, as you see, if you look at how black's placing her pieces, it really is like a Queen's Gambit has white. A Queen's Gambit exchange variation with colours reversed is exactly how.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yes.
How black's playing this, isn't it?
Oh, and so then she might do this minority attack kind of plan later.
I think the minority attack is sort of is there in all these exchange Cavacon positions. I mean,
yeah.
No, Keith would be happy with that.
Keith, yes, that sprang into my mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Keith is also a Cavacon player very often. So.
Yes. Oh, yes, for sure. We've seen him do exactly this kind of plan.
Yes. Queen c2. Knight e7. I'm not sure whether knight e7 is perfectly okay. I just the way the position has fallen now, I think black could also have considered knight f6, and that double pawn isn't much of a weakness. Black could follow with f5, but it's knight e7 is also perfectly solid. White took that. To me, that's a sign that white was possibly a little uncomfortable with her bishop on g5 already. I don't know.
Yeah, because black's... Oh, I suppose black's now got the bishops, but white could always trade one off, by going g4.
G4 and taking on g6. Well, if she takes on g6, then I think that once you've gone g4, that open h file can be an issue.
Yes.
But,
sure, yeah.
she can also try to get manufacture a situation where where black sort of gets encouraged to take on d3, and then the h file issue isn't there. Yeah, I just think. Well, I don't know. I would say it's simply very comfortable for black at the moment. Black has solved her opening problems, to use the old opening book jargon.
Yes.
And interestingly, I think Audrey took this with the knight. That's. I don't know. It's sort of nice. I kind of like I like the knight if it can go to g6, but it can't at the moment because of g4. So it sort of positionally feels like a very decent thing to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite
sure. She can organise it, because it'd be nice to get into like g6 to f4, wouldn't it, one day?
That would be lovely. Yeah, it's just
that bishop. Yeah, your own bishop on h5 is in the way.
It would be lovely, but not worth your bishop.
Yeah.
So yes, okay. And now, so knight takes also gives white this possibility of a mildly disruptive check on b5, which is what she played.
She's done it.
And I assume, since I don't really see the future for that knight going to g6, I assume she'll probably just come back, as she has. It's interesting. Oh, no, I don't think that's not it. No, that's fine. And now it's white's move. And, well, I think black's already a little more comfortable. I don't think white has any sort of serious problems yet. But black has certainly solved a lot of the the issues of the opening, I think. Okay, we'll come back to that one in a little while.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. I'm sorry,
Going
the wrong way there. Let's see what else we've got. So, Neve Bridgman against Shambavi. So, I mean, Shambavi, if I remember, is really young, like a really up and coming, promising junior.
Find that one out.
And Neve, I think, Neve's been, there or thereabouts for quite a while. Okay,
so Shambavi was born in 2011.
Yeah,
so is about 10.
Neve is one of the players in what is a very strong.
Neve's a bit older.
Yeah, she's part of a very strong cohort of sort of under 16 girls that we have at the moment.
Yes, and Neve's been coached. Or Neve's done work with one of the Northern players. I'll probably get it wrong. I thought it might have been Glenn House.
I think they probably come from a very similar part of the world.
Yeah. That was where I came up with the name from.
Yes.
Yeah. One of my friends who lives up there was telling me how well she was doing, a few years back. Yeah.
Yeah, but I actually think from what I've seen, she's put on quite a little burst of improvement recently as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Let's see what her opening move was in this game.
Yeah, because I play alongside her in.
No.
What? A D4? You're not too happy with this?
Hey, well, no. It's just that for quite a while, Neve, and this will be music to your ears, Natasha. She was a devotee of the Birds opening.
Fantastic, the Birds.
No doubt, a proud possessor of the legendary work "Trends in the Birds" opening.
I'm sure that must be on her bookshelf.
Not on a bookshelf,
but just an active.
A part of any serious player's chess library, and I have to say, I was once the victim of her Birds opening in a simultaneous game. It was a rather informal.
Have we still got the game, Peter?
No, I certainly don't have the. I believe I didn't have the game 10 minutes later, but maybe she does, and yeah, she. I think I got a decent position out of the Birds opening, if you can imagine that. But then she played very well and sort of tricked me 2 or 3 times. And I think she is tactically very tricky.
Yes. Yeah.
And
there was an epic game. I'm trying to remember. Was it her against... Sorry. I think there was some epic game. I'm just trying to remember. I think it was her against Nadia Jalfarelli, I think, in the 4NCL, which ended in a draw, if I remember right, but it was very tricky for both sides, and they were doing. It was a very exciting game.
I think I remember that game. My recollection of the game was Neve pressing quite hard.
Yes, she was ahead in the end game, wasn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I think she's sharp and tactical with lots of kind of aggressive ideas, which is always good. And obviously, Birds opening is, to give it its due, as will have helped to shape that playing style, I think. So she switched her openings, but I imagine we'll see that
I think it's a good idea for her to switch from the Birds.
Sorry, did you say it was a good idea?
I think it is a good idea for her to switch from the Birds and have it just as part of her repertoire.
Yes. A total reliance on the Birds opening, even from the author of this great work, admits it may not be the way. Okay, so I think she's playing what looks like a slow, solid structure, but some of these things have quite clear, collie system type openings have quite clear attacking ideas in mind behind. If I'm black in these positions, I want always to try to play c5 without having to play e6. I think there's a lot of ways in which this kind of move order black can try to play without maintaining the symmetry in this sense. I think there's a case for not going e6. Let's see what white conjures up here. Okay, so black's actually broken the symmetry, because it's not so clear that black's bishop will belong on d6 as it is that white's will belong on d3. That extra tempo may give white some attacking options, which means that e7 might be a more solid square for black's bishop. I mean, c6 fits well with various opening systems. You sort of wonder whether it's the right way to play when white's not yet attacking that center with c4. If you're going to play bishop d6, knight bd7, as people often play when they play c6, until white plays c4, you could argue that c6 isn't yet a necessary part of the setup. So I'm interested why she's played it so early. But okay, I suspect Niamh has a particular attacking setup in mind here. Probably b3, bishop b2, and some kind of knight e5. That strikes me as the kind of thing which would fit well with somebody with a bird's opening training.
By the way, Shambhavi played last week in, she was in the under-10 section. And I think we did look at some of her games in the commentary kind of early on there. And she finished with 3.5 out of 7 in the British under-10s.
Okay. That's interesting, yeah. So, bishop b2, knight bd7.
Ooh. The chat saying Zoe's fallen for a little trick in the dragon. So we'll check it. We'll check
okay. We'll go back there in a second. Let's just see where they've got to here, and then we'll go back and see it. Knight bd2, rook e8. So black maybe, if it was black's move here, black might well consider playing e5. I think I'd almost regard e5 as a kind of mini threat.
E5 is what black wants to get, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, if you get e5 now, then you will reach some sort of position where, it almost looks as if white is playing black and black is playing white. You know, a series of exchanges there would lead to some sort of structure which you typically get with Niamh's setup on the black side rather than the white side. And okay, white will be more comfortable and it will be more pleasant because she has an extra tempo, but... So I think she has two choices here. One is to play c4, which would mean that e5 would come at a bit more of a price, either an isolated queen pawn or misplacing that black knight from f6 a bit. And the other way to go would be knight e5. And again, I think knight e5 is a move which fits well with a kind of bird's opening background. And there it is.
And she's done it. Yes.
I think I'm understanding her.
Yes.
Queen c7 I would play. Okay, c5. That's also interesting. So the knight's come to e5, so it's a very natural and logical response to try and undermine the pawn which is defending it. And I suspect it's time, a few moves late, I have to say, Niamh, but it's there eventually. Time for that f-pawn.
Hey. F4 in.
There it is, f4. Okay, that's good.
Back to the birds.
yeah, it's basically now it's a birds with a few extra moves thrown in. Okay, so black is going to, I hope, develop. I don't think black wants to take on d4. I think that, broadly speaking, makes white's task easier. I would be looking to develop that bishop, maybe b6, bishop b7, possibly a queen move. Oh, she did take. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on why I don't like that. It doesn't exactly create weaknesses. It just seems to limit black's options. You know, you could imagine some position where you might try to play on the queen side and even eventually have sort of c4 as a distracting option if white starts building a big attack or something. You know, the possibility of playing c4 could help to keep white's pieces at bay rather than sending them so easily over to the king side. I just think it's a matter of keeping your options open.
It kind of stabilizes the center as well. So if white were to be thinking about doing a attack on the king's wing, for example.
I think she is. I'm pretty sure that's
I'm sure because she's a bird player, that's exactly what she does want to do.
Yeah.
Then having the center fixed like that,
I think that helps.
Makes it a little bit safer to do your king side attack.
It's almost as much a psychological point as a chess point. White doesn't have to keep worrying about, you know, what black might do with that c pawn, and doesn't have to keep bearing so many options in mind. I think it's clarifying things a little bit quickly. He takes and a5. Okay, so it's done with a specific idea in mind. She wants to play a4 now. And I think it's important when your opponent's planning a sort of fairly direct attack on the king side. It's important to find some kind of distractions, and a5, a4 could be a distraction. What worries me is I don't see a very strong downside to white playing a4 here.
I was just thinking.
And then, of course, a5 has weakened the b5 square quite substantially as well. I mean, if you were black, you would prefer to have found some way to play b5 and then to play a5, something like that. But a5 first does enable a4. But Niamh
doesn't do that. She is eager to get on with her kingside attack.
Well, I'm glad I described her as aggressive, because I think nobody can quarrel with that on the evidence here so far. I mean, you know, I'm talking about a4 proving a distraction on the other side, but g4 is pretty disruptive as well, because after the move g5, you will notice black's knight doesn't actually have anywhere to go.
That's a good point.
So
then,
that's quite serious. I mean, if it goes to e4, it loses a pawn. If it goes anywhere else, it loses a whole knight. And also, if the knight, even if the knight did have a square, let's imagine that. I mean, okay, knight f8 may prove to be a very sensible move because it defends h7. If the knight moved away from f6 without h7 being defended in response to g5, then I imagine a sacrifice with bishop takes h7 check, queen h5 check, queen takes f7 would win the game very quickly.
Gosh, it's
just imagine. I mean,
it is quick.
Just for the sake, to see. Let's just say she. I mean, I think it's a very ugly move, knight b6, but just to illustrate, the computer is clearly with me here. This kind of an attack is coming with great ferocity and extreme speed, and queen takes f7 and rook f3, and that will be the end of that.
Curtains.
So you see how much, a couple of small errors from black, and already some pretty dangerous things appear on the board.
This is what the birds can do.
That's almost that's just blatant marketing. Is your book still available? Actually,
I think actually it is, but it's some ridiculous price because it's in short supply on Amazon. So you can kind of get these second-hand copies for like 50 quid or something.
50 quid. I mean, it's a bit cheap.
Even I would not recommend that as a good deal.
It's a very inexpensive, but not ridiculous. Yeah. Okay. So I think white's g4 is very very sharp, and black has some issues here. By the way, Neve lost her game yesterday, but she was playing Harriet, and she put Harriet under some significant pressure in the opening stage, I think.
Okay.
I mean, eventually she succumbed to quite an unpleasant combination, which ended pretty much in checkmate. But initially, I thought she played the opening very well and had some interesting possibilities. Okay, so g4, and black has played knight f8, which is extremely prudent. That's about the only... It's almost the only good move I can see here, because you don't want to weaken the kingside pawns unless you really have to. And that threat to h7 being so serious, I think knight f8 is absolutely a very sensible, sharp...
It's a very good move from
It's a very alert response to the danger. Yeah, there's a good sense of danger, that is. And now, if I was Neve, well, she may press on, having made this... I don't know whether it's time to attend to black's a4 threat or time.
She could still play a4, couldn't she?
She's
not going to. We know she's not going to, but she could.
No, I'm not. I wasn't so sure then. I thought she might. I think she could have considered at that point playing a4. I'm not sure whether black's knight. I think black's knight is staying on f6 rather than coming to g6 and trying to. I don't think challenging white's knight in that way has particular track. I think Neve could have taken a time out there from the attack too. But this is all. I mean, it's a dangerous attack anyway. But it's just a question of how much. I mean, it may be that after a4, she's just going to move her rook on a1, and then a3 isn't much of a disruption because the bishop is the a1 square.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it does also give black the option of opening the a file, which is another form of potential disruption because the rook could come to a2 or something like that. I think a4 stopping all that might. I mean, it's always very difficult when you're attacking to judge the value of sort of losing tempi and taking and making a defensive move instead. But
I was just thinking, what about, like, say if white goes a4, black could go bishop b4, and you'd have to defend. But then maybe you do the bishop's better on d6 anyway, so you wouldn't really.
No, that's a very valid point. I'm not sure whether I don't think I'd be that worried about playing in c3 if I had to with white, because the bishop on b2 isn't playing a huge role in the attack yet, and you can always play c4 later if you need it.
Yeah, I see.
But I think that is a thought. But I think on the whole, a4 doesn't have any positional costs. It has a slight positional gain, and white's going to be able to resume all her aggressive intentions one move later. I mean, don't forget, black now has an additional problem in that the c8 bishop can't just develop to d7, because then the knight would still have no squares after g5. I mean, that knight is still that this knight on f6 still only has the d7 square to run to. So that the computer showing lots
so
of
if black tries to go like b6 and bishop b7, then I don't know, that c6 square might.
Well, she can do that, but then a move like bishop b5 might at some point turn out to be awkward because rook e7 would be bet9, knight c6, and it's just all. It looks like black is really struggling for space, which is another reason I would have played a4, just to sort of show her that she's not going to get any extra space lightly.
Yeah.
Okay, so queen f3, queen e7.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's not at all daft because that f7 square needs some bolstering as well. f5. I don't like that. I think there were. I think that's, as I said, I think Neve is a very strong attacking player with a very good sort of dynamic sense of. But that move smacks slightly of impatience to me. I think she should be. She had a very strong bind on the position, and by playing that, if, for example, pawns are exchanged on f5, I think it becomes. If white takes back the pawn, it would be easier for black then to develop because the knight's no longer being threatened by g5 and things.
I wonder if does she want ef5? Does she want to still go g5 maybe?
Well, but then the knight has an e4 square for a moment.
That's
quite a big. I mean, she could have perhaps gone rook a1, which I think would have helped to deal with the a4, a3 problem. And then f5 must be much more of a threat because after e takes, there are going to be some kind of discovered attacks or something.
Yeah.
It seems to me like rook ae1 is a move that she almost certainly wanted to play. And I don't think black's defensive setup is very easy to play. I don't think there's any need to rush here. I think she could have taken her time a little bit more. Let's see what happens. So e takes f5. I think that's the right move. And now she is thinking, okay. Well, I mean, what can we say? It's another very interesting. I mean, I think she could have done better there, but it's another very interesting position and lots of content. And
excellent.
Okay, let's pop back and respond to this before we see the other games. Let's respond to this question about Zoe Varney's alleged mistake. Which I mean, okay, aha. So after knight f6, Zoe played f3, which just feels. I don't know if that's a little bit early. Let's see. So that, by the way, when I said earlier that a lot of black setups in the accelerated dragon are all about trying to prevent white from getting a typical Yugoslav attack. The typical Yugoslav attack setup is to play f3, queen d2, bishop c4, and then castle queenside. And that is the setup which black is usually trying in the accelerated dragon to stop white from having. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. One of the ways is by a timely d5 move. So in a lot of positions, it's the fact that the pawn can go to d5 in one go, which is black's sort of trump card against ending up in a Yugoslav attack. In some other positions, there are some tricks involving things like queen b6, partly because you've just simply saved a tempo on not playing the move d6. Now, I don't remember here. No, in this position, I know that the most common move, I'm pretty sure, is bishop c4 instead of f3.
Okay.
And then when black castles, there are various systems. If white then plays f3, there are various very sharp lines where black tries to get d5 in quickly and that sort of thing. Against f3, my first thought would be whether black can play d5. And I'll just throw in at this point the fact that when black plays d5, as well as having to calculate that white can't take on d5 and all that sort of thing, and also needing to calculate whether white takes on c6 and then plays e5, in addition to all that, I think you'll find that bishop b5 is often a very awkward move if black hasn't castled yet.
Okay, just kind of knight and threatening to take on c6.
Yeah, if black blocks with bishop d7, then d5 is less well covered before, that kind of thing. And also, it might, there might be some positions where bishop takes c6 followed by e5 and stuff is very strong. I don't know exactly, but this d5 here definitely feels premature. Castles, I would guess, would be kind of threatening d5 with some force, but then white could transpose back into those other lines by playing bishop c4. What Harriet has done. Oh, she castled.
She has castled.
White played bishop c4. Okay, this one I'm sort of I think this is the one where queen b6 might be. the move. So the idea is simply that black is threatening queen takes b2 in many positions, although black needs to be very wary of situations where that suddenly ceases to be a threat. Or, for example, if white played a3,
yeah,
then queen takes b2 in these positions tends to lose a queen to knight a4.
Ooh.
Yeah, so queen takes b2 is rarely threatened once the move a3 is on the board. But fortunately for black, queen b6 is kind of a double attack, because as well as threatening b2, there's a positional threat of knight to g4. Oops.
I think it won't let you until white.
It won't let me move because it's white's move. But there's a positional threat of knight g4, attacking bishop on e3, and when white takes that knight, black can play bishop takes d4 or something. And it just sort of messes up white's structure and changes some pieces which black is very happy to change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's going on. But obviously, you know, these things are not without complication for black too. I'm trying to remember what the recommended. I mean, for example, I think, you know, something like queen d2 is a typical example of a move which will allow knight g4.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. No, apparently that's not true. Well, the engine is giving me pause for thought. It's possible here that black can grab a pawn and live to tell the tale, but those things are, you know, complicated and not for the faint-hearted. But I suspect that this is a position white doesn't tend to get if they know the opening well.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's yet kind of a big problem, but I know that in the position where white plays the other move order with bishop c4 before f3, I think the cautious move there is bishop b3 to try and avoid all these tricks before they can happen.
Oh, what? Just bishop b3 now for Zoe?
No, not bishop. Sorry. I need to go back a couple of moves. So here, where she played f3, I said the main move was bishop c4, and then after castles, instead of playing f3, which reached the game position, I think white tends to play the move bishop b3 first, prudently covering the b2 pawn and also taking the bishop off various sort of d5 threats and things, and so on. I think this is one way that black does it. That white does it. And I think that f3 is a little bit ambitious. You know, black plays this opening because white can't simply get the Yugoslav attack set up. And I think after queen b6, Harriet is demonstrating why white can't simply get it.
Okay. Oh, apparently
I'm not sure what white should play now to kind of limit the damage.
Oh, is this where the game's?
I think this is where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So she's.
Oh, wait a minute. No, has she played? No, I think those are both my moves, a3 and queen b2. Yeah, I think we're still here because no, she must have moved because Harriet's clock is ticking. Sorry, let's go to where we are. A3 she's played. Oh, she did play a3.
Yes.
No, that was me.
A3. No, I have a3 on my machine, so she has.
She played a3.
Yes.
Just, I hope Harriet didn't play b2.
But Zoe spent over half an hour.
Well, exactly. No, it's her clock time, which okay. I mean, as well as preventing queen takes b2, she's also preventing some queen b4 checks in the middle of sort of tactical variations. Or she might be prepared. For example, I'm trying to think about whether white can make life complicated by playing knight d5 in a position like this. And then her a3 move will have the value of also, for example, preventing queen a5 check.
Yeah.
By preparing the move b4 in response. That may not be true. b4 might have been quite tricky to get it. And b4 might have been quite dangerous anyway. But so I guess that's the sort of possibility that Harriet has to reckon with. So what is the strongest move now for black after a3, I wonder? Well, I think this is sort of kind of a mild opening success for Harriet to reach this position. I think it's... Yeah, you said someone in the chat said that Zoe had fallen for a trap.
A little trick. A
little trick, yeah. It's not one of those little tricks which leads to...
Not a massive opening trap, but a little trick.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that leads to sort of terrible disaster. but it is a little bit fraught with danger. And a3 looks to me like quite a sensible way of trying to deal with it. Oh, sorry, maybe I'm getting a little bit. Maybe I'm forgetting that the main point, maybe even taking the e-pawn rather than. Oh, but not here apparently. So why does that not work? Okay, again, a3 might be maybe. I mean, there's so many moves you need to consider here. There's knight f5. Knight f5 is sort of there in the position anyway, but I think that one's not going to be a problem. The main move here is probably knight d5. Yes, knight d5. That's the one I would be worried about with black. So bypassing the knight on prise and threatening the queen and trying to show that black's a little overstretched there. Queen c5, and then there will be some big hit. What's the big hit? No, knight takes c6 simply wins a piece because black can't take back with the queen. The bishop on e3 is now defended. They have to take the bishop, and we have time to take a pawn before taking the knight on e4. So, what I think theoretically white has fallen for a slight trick, but there are wrong ways of doing it here as well. So let's leave this one for the moment and see what Harriet can find against a3.
Yeah.
Okay. What haven't we seen yet?
I think
we haven't yet seen.
Board, we haven't yet.
Board 5. Sorry, I need to centralize. Is that okay?
Yes, that's great.
Right. I think before I centralize, I should just take us back to the beginning. Yet another e4.
Excellent.
Although, actually, the most aggressive game of the lot was the one that wasn't e4.
The birds. Which starts with
birds. Just had birds-like features. Okay, so a Caro-Kann, mainline Caro-Kann by a slightly unusual move order, but basically bishop f5. F3. I mean, the main lines all involve h4, but I've always thought about this position that white has some quite respectable sidelines here as well. But knight f3 mostly links with h4 in a lot of cases. White's trying to, because exchanging that bishop on g6 without, in a situation where black can take back with the h-pawn, isn't actually that scary. So white tends to play h4 and try and reach a situation where they can hassle the bishop in other ways. Knight d7, so it's never clear whether white has a threat of knight e5, but it's not a bad idea to cut the possibility out. And then knight h4, that's very unusual. But I don't think there's anything wrong with this move. It's unusual because taking on g6 isn't particularly scary for black when they can take back with the h-pawn, enjoy having that open h-file, and structurally they're very, very solid. Nonetheless, it's the bishop pair, so it's not a bad idea either. So e6 threatens the knight, so white has to take immediately. Bishop c4. Knight f6, all very logical. You see how part of black's claim, apart from enjoying this open h-file, is that it's difficult for white to make any very significant pawn breaks to open the game for those bishops.
Yeah.
The move you might like to play if you got the chance would be to push d5 if it was well protected, but as you can see, you're a long way from having that sort of protection at the moment. Queen d3. I assume that doesn't threaten bishop takes e6, but you probably gain a few moves.
Yeah.
Well, you probably gain a few minutes in black having to then reckon with the possibility. At the moment, bishop takes e6 could be met by queen e7 for sure. So definitely no threat yet, but you keep black thinking about it. Now I think it's much less likely to be a threat in general because f8 is free for the black king. So that also looks like a very logical move. Just as I said in that other game, one possible approach playing against White's bishop pair is to try and trade dark square bishops. Even though, I mean, maybe you don't do that here because the bishop on d6 is a better piece for the fact that there's an open H file. It gives it some sort of attacking perspective as well. But d6 feels definitely like the right square. And if the bishop pair comes to be a problem, then you play queen c7 and bishop f4 and try and trade one off.
I wonder where these kings are going, because if
oh yeah, that's a good question.
White goes kingside, then that H file could become a good attacking line for Black.
It
but then
could.
if Black goes kingside, then that's less of an issue.
When I had that phase in my career where I played the knight d7 calm rather more than I should have, I got one or two of these open H files, and I tended to find that, I think I had a couple of games where direct attacks on it worked okay, but I kind of realized that I'd had a degree of cooperation from my opponent, and that if White has ways of ensuring that isn't especially dangerous. Nonetheless, I think Black can go either way. But clearly, if Black goes queenside, then White starts to look at playing sort of c4, c5, b4, b5. So you could launch a pawn attack with White in those positions with Black. But, the bishop on c4 isn't perfectly placed for that. You could argue the bishop on c4 is sort of better placed if Black goes kingside and less well placed if Black goes. I think Black is more likely to go queenside, but it's
making me think of a move like a4 for White, because like whichever way you go as
White, right. There's sort of a move with applicability either way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true. That might be quite an interesting move. Bishop d2. That still keeps. That also makes sense. Whichever side people are casting. Oh, b5. Okay, well there you are. There's your declaration that Black probably isn't castling queenside. That's a very interesting move because it wasn't clear to me where Black's. I mean, going queenside and trying to use the H file was one definite possibility for Black. This one is, as I say, it sort of pretty much rules out queenside castling. A5. Okay, now what worries me a little bit with this, I mean, I can see the appeal of this kind of activity, but if White plays A4, Black is going to have to concede some White squares, probably by playing B4 or something like that, because B5 is very hard to defend. Black would have to concede some. Well, maybe she can defend them with Queen B6. I don't know. If she has to concede White squares, then I become a little bit nervous because White has this White squared bishop and Black doesn't.
Yep.
I would play A4 for White here, I'm pretty sure. But she's just gone A3. I think that kind of vindicates Black's approach rather more. Black. Then I have a feeling Black may find herself able to be claiming some space on the queen side without very much cost. We'll see. A4. So she's continuing gaining space, and you see she hasn't had. I mean, she's those pawns are quite ambitious. Black needs to be careful that White won't be able to break with C4 now at some point. You remember before I said White has this shortage of pawn breaks, but in a way, if you play C6, B5, A4, you give White a pawn break she didn't have before.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, C4 now looks
like okay, so that's a sort of prophylaxis against the pawn break. Castles. Knight d5. I like knight d5. I like it partly because it might prepare queen h4 threatening mate, and I understand that sort of thing. But positionally, I quite like it too because it's one of the, if it's one of the upsides of having made the move b5 is that you now have this sort of semi outpost for the knight. I mean, it's not I wouldn't describe it as a proper outpost, but it can't be attacked directly with a pawn such that that pawn could be taken. So, it's a nice central square for the knight and reasonably secure. So there's a lot to like about it.
Now, how's White going to meet this?
I think Black. I don't necessarily think that the B5 and A5 was timed perfectly, but I love the sort of dynamism and ambition in what Black's doing. I think I sort of, with players as young as her, that's one of the things you look for is that there's some real sort of aggressive intent there. H3 is probably quite a wise precaution just to make sure that, queen h4 at the wrong moment didn't become a thing, as they say. Now, how's white going to play here? Is she going to play c4? Is she going to bring a rook to the e file and then try to... I mean, one point of h3, by the way, which I didn't mention, is she's freeing up the possibility of moving her knight to e4. It was pinned against that h pawn, but now that black's knight has moved to d5, it opens up the e4 square for white's knight, and I kind of think that move also gives her the possibility, perhaps, of... I don't know, it just feels like that feels like a good centralizing move, which I might be tempted to try and discourage with black. So knight df6 feels like one possibility with that in mind. I think black could be sort of running a slightly fine line between... There's always a fine line, I think, between gaining space and creating weaknesses. And that's what's so fascinating, what black's doing on the queen side. I kind of like it, because for the moment it looks to me like the gaining space thing outweighs the creating weaknesses, but it isn't risk-free.
Yep.
Queen h4. I hope that doesn't constitute sort of an example of playing when what you were planning to play had your opponent not gone h3, and then not adapting sufficiently to the fact, if I had thought queen h3 was queen h4 was partly designed to provoke h3. If h3 is already on the board, it's less obvious to me what the purpose is here. She's now, if you think about black's position now, she's now attacking on both sides of the board.
Yes.
And that can be very effective, or it can sometimes leave you with nowhere obvious to put your king.
And she hasn't
committed her king. I mean, it may very well be, for the moment, the king may be safest in the center. There may be a lot to be said for not committing it. But, a move like knight e4 will force black to sort of explain to us what queen h4 is all about, I think. Knight e4 hits the bishop and sort of eyes up the g5 square as well.
Oh, yeah, for something like bishop g5 as well.
Well, perhaps. I mean, queen h5 looks safe enough for the moment, because there's no, that bishop on a2 is nowhere near coming to join in the haranguing of the queen. But you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a sense that I mean, it may be that knight e4 could be met by bishop f4 or something, but I'm more worried then about weakening the d6 square than I am about anything black's going to achieve on the king side. So, very interesting position, full of... I mean, black's played it with a really... I mean, whatever happens in this game, I think a young player with that kind of aggression and feel for dynamic possibilities in the initiative, that's a very encouraging thing anyway. Knight e4, okay. Yes. And bishop e7. So she's sort of wisely eyeing up that g5 square as well. But the trouble is, one problem now I would like with black probably to try and exchange that knight on e4 off with knight f6, but then for that moment the g5 square becomes available to white again. So interesting, very interesting. f3. Oh, I don't like that move so much, because it sort of weakens squares on the king.
G3. Yeah, because there's g3, and then you could, if you get your bishop back to
I think I see the idea. I think she's probably trying to play, thinking about bishop e1 to g3 perhaps. It's a rook on b8. Okay. So she has an eye on that weak d6 square. She wants to drive the queen back and so on. But just positionally, it looks like it has some downsides to sort of set against that idea. I like the idea, actually. Bishop e1 to g3 is a very interesting idea, but you can see that there are some positional risks to the move g3, because it just, these two pawns on f3 and h3, they create a hole on g3, and they... and it's a hole which is on the color square where black has a bishop still. So that creates some danger to white's king side. Okay, f3, knight f4. That's a logical move if it's possible, because if white's created that weakness, it makes some sense to try and exchange off the bishop. A, the bishop which she was intending to put to g3 probably, and B, the bishop which covers those squares. Now, does the white queen have a safe square to go to? I suspect knight takes h3 check is a scary enough thing that it will encourage white to take that knight.
If white takes the knight, I think white's dark squares are a bit worrying, though.
Yeah, a little bit, although it might be possible to sort of, at some point, to play g3, king g2, and, f4 or something. It might be that they can be cured, but I mean, they're not catastrophic because the knight on e4 is still a very strong piece. But yes, there is a danger to white's dark
So
squares.
this knight f4 looks nice,
but you
doesn't
know,
it?
if she doesn't take the knight, for example, queen e3 can probably be met by knight takes g2.
Oh gosh.
I think. I mean, that might be. I mean, knight takes
Isn't
h3
it?
might be dangerous too, but I think it's quite easy to see that knight takes g2 is pretty dangerous. So, oh, wait a minute. No, we need another move than that, apparently. Maybe it doesn't work. Sorry, I thought it was the bishop h4 check was going to be enough to clinch a void, but of course the king can run to d3. That might be all right, actually. I mean, obviously, if the king can safely run to d3, then white's doing well. So maybe black needs to look at knight h3 instead, or maybe that runs into the same problem. Maybe the king is running away anyway. That's interesting. So, nonetheless, you need to have a pretty strong. You need to be pretty brave to to sort of calculate all that and rely on the king's ability to run away. I mean, I'd be impressed if white doesn't play bishop takes f4 just because it seems quite scary. Yeah, it's one of the joys of attacking is that people often are very reluctant to test the variations where their king has to go walkabout.
Yes.
So let's see. So white did take the knight, as I thought she probably would. I mean, you know, it doesn't really matter if sitting here with a computer evaluation, we can see that white would have been okay by running the king around. And yes, okay, that's within reasonable bounds of human calculation. It's still a scary thing to do at the board.
Hi, Chris. Chris is suggesting, Chris W. Baker IM is suggesting knight takes h3 check and queen g3 in that other variation. So if
the knight's on e4.
For black, if here.
Sorry, knight takes h3 check. No, the white's
no, Chris,
on e4.
yes.
Otherwise,
there's a flaw in that plan.
Yeah, there's a flaw in the plan. Yeah, no, if queen g3 check was available, that would have certainly seen white off. But I think there was a serious flaw in that plan. But, you know, I think it's, I mean, white's not even objectively doing that well after this. So it would, you know, it's incredibly scary to even allow your opponent those kind of possibilities without the promise of some objective advantage at the end of it. So I'm not at all surprised that white took on f4. And this is where we are. And the position is, it's another position which is beautifully poised. So
yeah. See, I quite fancy black's chances of being able to generate something on those dark squares.
I do as well, but I also think, you know, again, the line is fine if white gets the move a sort of if white can consolidate the king side and then play a well-timed c4, black could find that, you know, the attacking on both flanks is a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So you were talking about getting g3 in, were you, to consolidate g3 and king?
I didn't mean immediately because I was a bit concerned that queen f5, I couldn't defend the h pawn in the immediate term.
Yeah.
But I mean, there may be the move h4 there. Yes, I mean, it's certainly something to consider, but I mean, it requires fairly precise timing because, for example, if you went g3, queen f5, and h4, the queen can pop back to h3. And then you need to make sure that there's not going to be something kicking your knight away, otherwise the whole thing collapses. So it may be playable, but it's not without risk. And, you know, even if I have to meet g3 with queen c7, black's very okay anyway. It's just that the fact that she's attacking on all flanks always requires quite careful handling. You know, you see a lot of games where people are doing objectively quite well by attacking on both sides of the board, but then they sort of at some moment they attack on the wrong side or something goes, and it can collapse a little bit quickly because you are very overstretched or very far stretched. It remains to be seen whether it's overstretched. I think, but I love the way black's playing this anyway. As I said, you know, whatever happens here, I kind of think if you play like this, it bodes well for the future.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about someone who, you know, is that age, that's a very important consideration. Okay, shall we go and take a quick flip through?
Yes,
let's everything. Maybe return to Ketty. We haven't seen
Ketty
for a while, and quite a lot's going on here too. Okay, so let's see how they got here from where we were. So we had She played bishop e3 and black played queen c7. And then white did immediately play the knight h4 idea that I'd already mentioned. Now, I think the reason knight h4 wasn't very good on the previous move was probably that black could have played e takes d4, forcing queen takes. So part of what bishop e3 is about is defending d4 as a preparation for that knight then sort of embarking on a career of its own. And, well, this is one of the things I said black needs to be concerned about, the possibility of that knight coming to f5. I don't think black needs to be as worried about it coming to g6 as was possible when I first mentioned it, because the rook's no longer on f8. It's not, it might force the bishop to move to a strange square, or it might be that it consumes so much time that black can even consider ceding the bishop pair and getting something for. Actually, she is worried about g6. Okay, so she was worried about the knight coming to g6. It's certainly a downside of h6 that g6 as well as f5 is kind of on the table. Knight f8, you could argue, is directed at both of those moves. Black may well be willing to take it off if it comes to f5, when white needs to take that with a pawn, and black's knight is covering the g6 square as well. So the questions I would ask here is, can white consider queen f3 to put the knight on f5 and be able to take back with the queen? And also, does white need to be concerned about e takes d4 at any point, or does that bishop merely add more pressure? I mean, I quite like Ketty's plan. I just wonder whether I'm sure it's not a good move. I'm just thinking that it might be fun to just check why knight takes e4 is not a good move. Oh, I think I can see why. I mean, so whenever you play knight h4 in the Spanish or the Philidor, you need to just check that there aren't any tactics based on the fact that it's neutral.
Just uncovering an attack on that knight.
Yeah, so uncovering an attack on the knight. But I think if black plays it here, oh, sorry, black's move. It's white's move. Okay, that might not be so relevant then. No, I think in general the idea was after knight takes e4, amongst other things, queen h5, defending the knight and attacking f7 is probably pretty devastating. Okay, so black played knight f8 and white has gone queen f3.
Okay.
So I think one idea may be to play knight f5 where you can take back with the queen rather than the e-pawn. I'm trying to think what other plans might be. Well, clearly the bishop on e7 is now, well, it's tied to that diagonal for the moment anyway, but it needs to be to keep an eye on the knight on f6, because otherwise bishop takes h6 and queen takes f6 would be an idea. White's next move might be knight f5. It could just be rook d1 and building the pressure. It's still, even at this stage, you feel black still hasn't quite solved the problem of the c8 bishop, although it does now have a diagonal it can move to. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. At the point where the knight and the queen have moved away from defending d4 is going to be one of the candidate moments to, finally implement this exchange. And of course, it's possible that she wants knight e6 coming with a tempo after white recaptures. There we go. Knight e6, that makes sense. Now, I think white won't have anything better than just to drop the bishop back, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, in principle, you might quite like to keep the bishop on d4, so knight e6 makes a lot of sense. Bishop back again. Now, what's black's idea for sort of the next stage? Takes and knight e6 were clearly a good idea, I think, but black needs a sort of stage 2 of the plan.
Would she want to bring her knight out some more to either c5 or g5?
I'm looking at knight g5. I like the idea of, well, it attacks white's queen, so it's pretty critical. And there is pressure on the e-pawn as well. So, I imagine the key question there is whether white can profitably take on
so
knight g5. If white can't take, then knight g5 is quite a tempting idea. So knight g5 takes, knight f5 is one way to do it, and probably the way to do it, unless there's some reason why takes. So after knight g5, unless there was some reason why knight g6 was a good move. She's played knight g5. That's good. Okay, so bishop takes g5. All this has happened, and she's gone to f5, which again seems like the logical thing. I suspect if you go to g6, black simply avoids the exchange of the bishop, and that knight is in severe danger of ending up stranded there.
Yeah.
It can't be taken for the moment, but you don't want to rely on that in the long term. So that the moves seem extremely logical. Both players are playing very sensible moves. Knight f5. Now, I suppose one problem black has is that if she simply has to return the bishop pair, then that g5 pawn could turn out to be a little bit weak. And the other thing we know from a huge number of examples is that opposite coloured bishops favour the player with an attack on the king.
Yeah.
And this is a typical example. If the bishop on c8 is no longer on the board, that square on f7 could prove quite difficult to defend.
I'm thinking black might... Well, I suppose you want to drop your bishop back somewhere, first of all.
You want to not take on f5 unless you have to, I think.
Yeah.
Because after queen takes, I think the g-pawn is hard to defend even in the short term.
Yeah, because I think black might try and go g4 at some point.
Yeah, she would need white's knight out of the way to justify that. If the knight wasn't there and she had g4 as a means of developing the c8 bishop, that might be quite a good idea. But I think it's going to be very hard to evict white's knight for the moment.
So bishop f8, is that possible?
Well, bishop f8, the first thing I would look at as white after bishop f8 would be knight to h6 check, because I would be nervous about the structure that would happen after. But on the other hand, it's probably not good. It's probably not good because f7 is well enough covered, so black can just play bishop
queen
g7.
g6 is a move. Okay, queen g6.
Queen g6 is a move, but it's only a sort of brief bit of fun. Black could either break the pin with d5 or more likely just bishop e6.
Yeah.
Okay, white has an f5 square in that moment. Maybe there's even better things for black, but that doesn't convince me. So in that case, I think bishop f8 is probably the right move. What has she played? I'm getting confused now by our... Oh, she did take on f5 and then played rook f8.
I didn't think she was going to. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so bishop f8, what was she worried about, I wonder? I mean, I'm sure there were better moves than knight h6. It was just my first thought that, the knight on f6 can be vulnerable. How would white build an attack here?
Yeah. Well, can you attack the g pawn directly? So like queen g3.
You maybe can. My assumption has been that if black can take f5 at a moment when white has to take the pawn with the pawn, that black would prefer that to when white takes with the queen.
Yeah.
But if g5 is hard to defend, that may not be true. So queen g3. Let's see what alternatives. I mean, it's you probably want to check that I can't take on e4 and then take on f5 as well. But I think the knight coming to g5 is probably scary enough for black. Oh, that's not the thing. I could take with rook or knight, but I'm going to assume I take with the knight. Bishop f5. Yeah, I think this is scary for black. So I would play knight takes g5.
Yeah.
Bishop g6, almost certainly. Now, black has the move d5 in answer to queen h4. Otherwise, queen h4 would threaten bishop takes f7 check and mate on h7, which would be vicious. But I think queen h4 is met by d5. So white needs a way to sort of increase the pressure without... But I quite like white here. I mean, there are other ideas like knight e6 and then taking the bishop on g6, which I doubt if that's the most ferocious thing white has. But again, it's another thing which I'd prefer not to have to worry about if I was black. I assume rook e6 isn't a good move. It's got a certain pizzazz, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Should we just check that? No, it doesn't have much pizzazz according to the engine. Well, if they take it, then it does. It's okay. It's okay if they take it, actually, because that discovered check with the knight is not to be messed with. And queen takes g6 is a pretty nasty follow-up in many positions as well. So that's not a bad idea. It's just that I think it can probably, this flashy move can be, I don't know, what's black doing here? It's a cute idea. I mean, it's the sort of thing that you can imagine as black you might be quite scared of, whether it was good or not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the move is here, but there's probably some way for black to deal with that. Okay, I mean, that's a little bit fanciful. So queen g3 is possible. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm not totally convinced that black had to rush into taking that knight on f5. But of course, it's quite a strong piece. You could see why.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You can see why.
Takes, and then she played rook f8, which is fairly clearly designed to free up her knight. Yeah, she's covering f7 so that the knight can move next go. Yeah. So I guess the idea is that after queen takes g5, she's going to play knight takes e4, recovering the pawn.
Yeah.
My assumption, and that seems to make pretty good sense. Yeah.
Yep. That looks okay for her.
Yeah, that does look okay. So Ketty is currently
having a think about that.
Having a think and trying to see how she. I mean, you feel that it's still white who has a little bit of an attack against the king, and the opposite color bishop should help with that. Of course, the other side of the opposite color bishop equation is that in some endgames it's going to, help black to defend if black is indeed defending. And white potentially has some weak dark squares. So on the queen side, that square on b4, the b2 pawn, the d4 square, these are all potential weaknesses if black can manage to free up her position enough to if she can cover the white squares on the king side, she has black squares she can try and play on elsewhere on the board. So I slightly prefer white's position, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that this is going to go well for white. I think this is probably a very important moment. I haven't seen what the right move is for white yet, but I sort of think it's quite. Oh, she's played one. What's she done?
Oh, what's she?
Rook ad1. Okay, I mean, if rook ad1 is a perfectly okay move, but on the other hand, I'm inclined to think that if that's the best she has, then black's probably not doing too badly. So now as black, I mean, one thing which that g pawn does if it survives, the g5 pawn, if it survives, it provides black with yet another interesting dark square for the knight on e5.
Ah, that's true. Yeah, because
so all these dark squares. I mean, again, that may be true actually. If the knight comes to e5 too quickly, you might find that white has a quick attack with h4, pawn takes pawn, f4, something like that. It's not one of those super permanent outposts. It's a distinctly double-edged one. But okay, the good news for white is that it's difficult for black to unpin that f pawn. Because I think if the king goes to the h file, white's going to have some tactical options, trying to swing rooks or that kind of thing, or even taking. I mean, for the moment, it can't go there because white would take on g5. So knight d7 is one possible move, but there's a lot for black to think about here. By the way, after knight d7 and knight e5,
yes,
black is finally threatening to trap the queen with g6.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that we've got so used to g6 not being an option because a queen takes g6 check that it's quite interesting that in 2 moves time black could produce a situation where it suddenly is.
So that's maybe quite a nice plan then for black. Knight d7 and e5.
Well, as plans go, winning the queen is a good one, but
it's a good one.
I mean, yes, I mean, white. The idea I mentioned just before of white playing h4 in response might be relevant because it does give the queen a square on h3 and. I don't know. That's one possible. Another thing I just wondered about. I was just thinking that if knight d7, can white try to play e5?
E5 for white.
Because now, if black takes with the knight, White has a very annoying mini combination, which
Ooh, rook d7 at the end.
I think, yeah, but I still wanted to just check because after queen c8, the rook is pinned.
All right, now we have to think about this now, don't we?
Yeah, that's the trouble. I was hoping to avoid having to. Most inconvenient. Well, the sort of what would be really nice and what would turn this from a combination into an interesting exchange sacrifice would be if White could just defend the queen and the white squares are so good that White's still doing very well. So if I could play g4, oh, the computer's well impressed by that. If White could play, oh, it's not so bad. If White could play g4 defending the queen and thereby threatening rook takes e7, I could then show that by playing knight e4 and trying to take on g5 with the knight after. And actually, if the bishop is bishop can't go anywhere else probably because of taking on f7, and if the bishop goes to f6, then knight e4 obviously works beautifully in terms of my light square plan. My biggest threat being here to take on. My big threat here is to take on f6 and then play queen g6 check.
Oh yes.
Which is rather nice. So I mean, there's the makings of an interesting exchange sack here. I must admit, when I suggested the line, I hadn't noticed queen c8, so I didn't realise I was suggesting an interesting exchange sack. But it's quite a nice idea because it sort of double crosses Black's intention of taking the dark squares. By the way, the structure can change very suddenly. If White plays e5 and Black plays d5. If Black plays d5, we may have some vicious tactic with bishop takes d5. I think we probably have a tactic. But if there's no tactic, it's a very fundamental change of structure, after which White's bishop on a2 can go from being, the best minor piece on the board to a slightly problematic one. So, this is back to Philidor again, the mastermind behind this defense. It's like structure is everything, really. And position moments like that really kind of indicate why. Right. Okay. This is fascinating. What has happened in real life?
Well, no, we have had some moves in real life.
Oh, she played knight d7 in real life. Wow. And yeah. Did Ketty go? No, that's my moves apparently. How do I get rid of my moves again?
Wait a minute.
I hope I haven't influenced the.
She's gone knight d7.
But really? The engine suddenly really likes e5 much more than before.
Cass has gone knight d7, and Ketty's having a think.
Oh, okay. So she is probably thinking about e5, and if she is,
probably thinking about e5.
I think it could be very dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a beautifully thematic idea. I mean, I'm absolutely certain that she will at least be giving it a lot of consideration.
Yeah.
It really does. Okay, shall we let her have a think about that? And
check in on board 1 again, because I think there's been action there as well.
Okay, I'm also wondering whether I maybe should take a 5-minute break.
I was actually thinking just the same. Should we do a 5-minute break first and then come back?
Perhaps we should do a 5-minute break, and there might be quite a lot of action when we come back.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see you. Thanks. We'll see you in 5 minutes, everyone. Thanks.
Great. That's good. Thanks.
And I'm going to put this. I'll put your screen off and put the.
Oh, I'm going to. Yes.
I'll put us off, but keep the timer on. Hiya, welcome back. Okay, I'm going to put the your screen back on. Now let me get this right. Here we go. There we are.
Right. So shall we do what we were going to do and head to board 1?
Let's have a look at board 1.
Oh, good heavens.
I think Harriet's queen might have got into a bit of trouble here. Let's see how this all has happened.
Really? Okay, so...
Well, maybe.
Yeah, no. So A3.
Hi, Max Langeman.
So I want to make sure that what we're doing is the live moves rather than my analysis. So what happened? Oh no, that's too far forward. Okay. Oh, so has Harriet done exactly what we analysed? Knight takes e4.
Maybe.
Our analysis suggested that was a little imprudent.
Okay.
So that's very Gordon Brown, isn't it? Knight takes e4. Knight d5. Queen takes b2. So we discussed.
Yeah,
we discussed queen c5, knight takes c6, which lost a piece some way or other. So she's played. Oh, sorry. Switch between them there by mistake. So queen takes b2, which looks horrifically risky.
Because you were saying a little bit earlier on that once the pawn's gone to a3, there is an increased risk of that queen getting trapped if black have.
Yeah, I mean the specific thing was with the immediate knight a4, and obviously there's no knight a4 now. Well, the problem, as far as I can see, is just of black simply ending up with a situation where she doesn't win her piece back. But of course, it may. I may not be seeing clearly. Maybe it's even worse than that. I'm thinking that knight takes e4 was already probably a mistake. Can we just go here?
Yeah.
After knight takes e4, knight d5, I don't see a very simple way for black to do this.
Yep.
Or indeed a way for black to do it at all. So I did wonder if a3 might be quite a clever move, but I can't remember what theory says after a3. I mean, the position will have been well explored. There will be a theoretical solution after a3, but I do think knight takes e4 is definitely not it. I mean, can it be that after this knight g4, the thing I mentioned originally, the more modest version, is the way? No, even that seems to run into some knight. No, I don't know. What does that run into? So I can't actually work out what the engine wants black to do here. A3 certainly seems to be the most sort of clever way to test black's knowledge of the line. So knight takes definitely seems to be a blunder by Harriet. Knight e5, queen takes b2. Now the moves. Oh dear. Well, the first move that springs to mind as a possible problem is rook a2. Because that is another way of showing after a3 that queen is very short of squares.
Yes, and actually that's not an obvious. Like you might like one's instinct, or my first instinct is to look at things like rook b1.
No, absolutely.
But actually rook a2.
But I mean, you sort of if you play these sort of things, you will normally have seen a few rook a2s which come into their own. Okay, I mean that's not quite the end of the story. I don't think. I mean, there were lots of nice games, particularly in the early years of the modern defense and that kind of thing, where black was happy to give the queen for a rook, a bishop, or even sometimes two pieces and a lot of dark squares. But the problem black has here is that knight on e4 is always hanging at the end as well.
Yeah.
So, if there was no knight on piece, bishop takes d4, rook takes. Rook
Hello,
a2.
I am Adam Hunt.
Harriet's
brother's in the chat.
Yeah, not the ideal moment.
Adam, you might have come in at a bad moment. Now Max Langeman's asked the format of the tournament, and just to say, this is a Swiss tournament. It's a 7-round Swiss, so it goes from Thursday afternoon to Sunday afternoon. Because there's only, as I think, 11, approximately, not
11 players, I think.
11 players, I think. It does mean they will actually play most of the players in the field, but not all of them. So we might see some uneven matchups at the end of the tournament.
Yes, I mean, we're actually getting some very, very interesting
some big games already. Yeah.
And tough matchups very early in the tournament, aren't we? So
yes.
This looks, I don't know, I'm wondering. I mean, maybe Harriet just thought this was her best chance after knight d5, but it does look quite difficult. So, sorry, we were analysing rook a2. Rook a2 is presumably what she played, yeah? No, she took on e4. Knight takes d4, and now presumably she wants to play rook a2.
She's done it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I see. This is going to be, this is. So just to check, after f takes e4, there was no other way for black to play this, I assume. So bishop takes d4 would still be rook a2, I think, and the queen has no squares at all. So then we really would be looking in the realm of queen takes. So, and knight takes rook a2. It looks like black will have to play knight takes c2 and lose a piece. It's interesting, given that it looks almost like she's set an opening trap. It's interesting that white is so far behind on the clock.
Yeah, well, it could be that she's familiar with it, but she doesn't remember the exact move, so she has to kind of work it all out from scratch.
Yeah, I suspect that she wasn't so familiar with it, and that a3 was actually a very good piece of improvisation at the board, but it's obviously cost some.
Yeah,
obviously cost some time on the clock.
Yeah.
This looks very, I mean, objectively very difficult for Harriet, but so she did go knight takes d4, rook a2, and that's where Harriet is now thinking. So does she have any?
Do you mind scrolling just slightly down?
Sorry, yes, absolutely. I was just fiddling with the backwards and forwards button. Does she have any other move here than knight takes c2 check?
Well, the queen doesn't have any.
Doesn't have a whole bunch of places to go.
Yes.
I mean, knight f3 check making a route for the queen is sort of legal, as they say, but it seems very hard to imagine that could compete with knight takes c2 check. So after knight takes c2, I'm strongly assuming that white will take that, because king moves make no sense. Knight takes e3 would rescue the queen.
Yeah.
So queen takes c2, queen takes, rook takes looks like a likely ending we're going to reach, where black actually has 3 pawns for a piece, but is facing a very unpleasant threat of knight c7 and bishop takes a7, trapping a rook as well, I think.
Yeah.
In addition to all the other things in the position, isn't it true that after this, white is not only hitting the e7 pawn, but also threatening knight c7? And this
is looking very good for Zoe, isn't it?
Pretty catastrophic, actually. I don't really see. So maybe any other way here? I just wonder whether, whatever the engine thinks, whether you might, as a human being, try to play some position where you actually lose queen for a rook but win the dart squares, like play knight f5 here or something. Seems a bit. Oh, okay, no. Does seem a bit far-fetched. And if white chooses just to take the piece, that wouldn't be much of a joy either.
Yeah, no, I think this is really tricky.
It is really grim. I mean,
yeah.
The other move, which is just about possible to consider, I suppose, is just to retreat the knight with knight c6 and play with a rook and a rook and 2 pawns for a queen. But I mean, white's pieces are really active and strong anyway. So
yeah.
Yes.
So Harriet's got to think of what line gives her the most, except she's in a worse position, and then
I don't think
losing position. Losing position.
I think she may
not beat about the bush. Except she's in a losing position and work out what gives her the most chances.
Yeah, that's the only way to handle this, I think. Yeah, and it's no, it's a rather tough day for Harriet. Okay, let's pop to board 2 because I have from what I saw, I think that Ketty may have missed what we thought was a pretty dangerous
E5 we were looking for, weren't we?
Yeah, let's just pop back there a moment because there has been a certain amount going on, and I think it's looking a lot more comfortable now for Black. So if you remember, I said that if Black manages to get knight d7 to e5 in, then the g pawn on g5 is actually quite useful for creating an outpost. As you can see, White's teeing up to challenge that outpost, but we thought the critical moment was after knight d7 that White could try to play e5.
E5 straight away.
E5 straight away.
If whilst the queen was on f5, I guess.
Yeah, e5 straight away. And the variation we had was knight takes, rook takes, and although it looks like the rook's coming to d7 and winning material, but Black has the resourceful queen c8. And then I was suggesting just supporting White's queen with something like g4 and trying to show that actually Black can't hold this pressure. I mean, it's not unusual to have exchange sacrifices which really emphasize the attacking strength of the opposite color bishops. And this looks like one of those moments. I think this would have been horrible for Black to deal with.
And you had the move.
I mean, I liked the move just g4, but there may be something else as well. The engine doesn't seem so enthused by g4. It's also possible there's another move. I mean, I'm trying to think what it would be. I'm a bit baffled what a better move could be than g4 here, but in any case, I think this was really what White needed to do in terms of just sort of the thematic continuation of how she'd played up to that point. And of course, you see lots and lots of games in which, knight e4 according to the engine, but okay. You see lots of games in which people play sort of good chess up to a certain point, and then at that critical moment where they actually need to exploit everything they've done up. Oh, I see. Knight e4 actually maybe threatens knight d6, bishop takes, and then taking on f7 with the bishop and trying to mate on the h file. That might
nice.
Might even decide things immediately. I mean, this is a very dangerous position for Black, and I think Ketty will regret not having gone for this. So instead, if I can try to differentiate the moves that actually happened from my moves, she played queen g4. Clearly deciding, I mean, she noticed, as I said, there was a danger of knight e5 followed by g6 threatening the queen. So I think she's really only attended to that side of things, and she's missed the moment in terms of pressing her own initiative. And this gives Black a tempo to come to e5. And now, I don't really see an argument why the bishop on a2 should be so much better than the bishop on e7. And I think Black's knight, as long as it can stay on e5 for a while, is quite happy. There are things to like about Black's position now. You feel like she's kind of survived that danger moment. However, Ketty has a plan. After g6, she plays g3. As I said before, it's not a permanent outpost on e5. It's just a useful sort of staging post for a while. And now Black, I suppose, should be thinking about whether there is any way in which she could make it dangerous for White to play f4, or whether she could try to prevent f4, perhaps considering queen b6 to pin the pawn. Those kind of things. I don't know whether did she move, or is she thinking now after g3? I think
Kat is still thinking at the moment.
Yeah, I think this is the moment. So queen b6 is one possibility, just to pin that f4. But unless queen takes b2 is a serious danger, which it may be, but it would be, for example, covered with one move by bishop b3. So after queen b6, let's say White has to defend b2, plays bishop b3, and then the idea would be to play king g2 and play f4 anyway, and try and get the attack going like that. And king g2 queen b6 forces White to play king g2 before playing f4, but the king move's quite helpful. If you're going to be attacking on the king side, you might want your king on g2 to bring your rooks over to the king side anyway. So I don't think any of that holds white up very drastically. The question is, can Kata do anything which kind of distracts white?
Peter, Zoram's saying he likes your Scotch game book.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I enjoyed writing that one, actually. That was a lot of fun. Thank you. Oh, that's nice. If I'm one of your favourite authors, that's really good. Thank you. Yeah, so interesting. I mean, I sort of thought when white went queen g4 to e2, I mean, I was partly influenced by the fact that I felt she'd missed a tactical opportunity, but I also kind of felt that was black getting back into the game. But maybe this g3 idea sort of still puts back under a little bit of pressure. I mean, it's an interesting question. If we manage to drive the knight out of the way again, how strong is that going to be for white if black makes some sensible precautions? For example, if white then tries to play e5, the position is, she plays f4, she drives the knight away again. I wonder what the next stage of that plan is as well.
Yeah, because white's king would be much more open.
Well, white's king's a little bit vulnerable too, but after e5, but you still feel that actually she's doing a good job of showing that the bishop on a2 is quite a powerful force.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting position. We'll leave them to it for a bit, I think. Shall we catch up with some of the lower boards which we haven't seen for a while? We've been a bit concentrated on boards 1 and 2 because there's been an awful lot going on there. Shall we switch quickly to board 5 because the engine's telling us that black's doing very well, and we were kind of impressed with black's strategy. A little nervous that she was attacking on both sides of the board, but kind of nervous but impressed at the same time, I guess. So it's gone on a very long way from where we saw it, and sorry, quick pawn count. Yeah, still 6-all, but okay. White has a pawn attacked on c2, which isn't well. It's quite defendable, but defending it will make the rook passive, I guess. Pawn on a3 might be open to attack, but again, it's not the end of the world. I mean, all black's pieces are very active, aren't they?
Yeah, and I
rook
think
on h4, rook on b2, bishop on f6. You've got to admire her sort of placing her pieces on active squares. Rook e4 looks like a very useful move.
Is what I was looking at too.
Yeah. White needs to have rook e4 in mind, and rook e4 combined. Maybe, I mean, if white's playing a move like rook d2, she would need to be wary of black playing something like rook e4 and then possibly following it with g4 with ideas of bishop g5, things like that. I think it's I'm not sure whether white can defend everything, but it's certainly black calling the shots at this point.
For sure.
She's got a pretty handy initiative. Do you want to see how they got here, or do you want to take that on trust and move to one of the others for the moment?
We could see how they got here.
We could see how they got here. I mean, it was a very interesting position we left them at. So what's the quickest way to do that? We'll go right back to the beginning, because I think they had an awful lot of moves since we were last there. We'll just shoot through to the position they were at. So black did all this exciting attacking on there. And then she played queen h4 as well. Knight e4, bishop e7, f3. That's right, knight f4. White believed the threats with some plausible. I see the queens came off immediately after we were there.
Okay.
Because we were talking about the possibility of white playing g3, which would recapture some dark squares but had obvious sort of potential implications for the king. White's gone for, I would say, a rather less ambitious approach of trying to exchange queens. And, I guess the hope here for white is that if black's pushing on both sides of the board but doesn't exactly get anywhere with those plans, then those things may turn out to be a little bit loose. But I do feel after queen d2 that it should only really be black who is the one a little bit. Now, interesting questions here, like, do you play c5 quickly? Do you push on with b4 at some point, hoping that the pressure outweighs the weaknesses. Difficult decisions. She went knight f6. She's coming. Well, she's using probably the d5 outpost again, but there's those squares on the king side as well, aren't there? So g3 and f4 that we talked about before. This could give white a chance to go c3 and try and slow black down on the queen side. Knight e4. I think white might have been wise there to sort of believe black's pressure on the queen side and try to slow it down a bit with c3. Because, even if black gets c5 in and everything, there are, at the end of the day, there is the potential that b pawn will become a bit of a weakness. Whereas now, again, it feels like more likely that black is going to get to attack white's weaknesses before white gets a chance. So
I suppose white might be aiming for just going for swapping things off and going for an opposite coloured bishop ending, because by the time you get right to the ending, then there's the reputation that they can be drawn.
Yes, that's true.
But they're still attacking before you get to that stage.
Yes. I mean, black could take on e4 and go rook h4, but I think she was probably wise. Well, I don't know. It's difficult to say. Knight d5 has its points as well. I mean, it does give white, presumably, an extra opportunity to go c3. And, if black had gone straight in with taking on e4, rook h4, and maybe some quick b4 or c5 or something, the dark squares look very nice for black here, but they still do. Oh, I think that's a concession. That's not a move I would have made lightly, particularly in view of what you said about the opposite colour bishop. She might be quite keen to have kept them as a sort of drawing resource, because it depends also what white's evaluation of the position is as she goes through this. Is she, she may have a more optimistic impression of how she's doing than we're giving.
Yeah.
But the one justification for this would have been if she could have played knight c5 and held it there. But I think knight c5 takes rook c8 or something, it drops off immediately. Black could even do it.
This is now looking good for black, isn't it?
I think things are going very much in black's direction here. But she still needs to keep
sorry, can you scroll down even slightly more?
Oh, sorry, yeah, sure. Down.
Names in.
Okay. Oh, sorry, that's up.
Down,
yes.
Anusha Subramanian.
Yes. So I think you could sort of see now what the point of that exchange.
Can we put both names on?
Sorry, not very easily. No, how am I meant to do that?
No.
Only by reducing the size.
No, you can't, because the chat. Sorry, because that.
I can only do that if I reduce the size of the.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to have a large diagram, I think.
No, you're right.
I do wonder about knight c3, actually. After this exchange, if she could have gone the other way, I see a bit more. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is that if you had the knight against the bishop and you could stop black breaking with b4, that seems a bit more promising. For example, if I had time to play knight f2 here, and then the move c3 to try and come with knight d3, then I feel I have quite a tough thing to break down. What worries me with white is the fact that black's coming with b4 so quickly. And knight c3 always also encourages black in this kind of rook h4 kind of idea as well. After knight f2, if black plays b4 immediately, that's something which needs to be analysed. Takes, and you can try and show that a4 is weak before all white's pawns drop off. If white could do that, I think it would give a bit more chance of sort of holding the position without feeling under such pressure. After c3 doesn't feel like the square I want that knight to be on. And whilst I can see the point from the point of view that whenever black plays b4, the a4 pawn will be weak, I think, from judging by the position we saw, black was able to drive that knight back further and sort of go to. Now I guess rook h4 came. She's doing this incredibly sensibly. She wants to drive that knight back to e2, so then she can proceed with her b4 plan. Natasha?
Yep.
Pretty systematic use of her pressure for a player of her age. Now I do wonder. So if f4 now, I assume that black's going to go g5, or was intending to go g5. We know that white. Oh no, that's what happened. Aha.
She's played it.
She played g5. This is really nice use of the bishop against the knight. Actually, very instructive. That's really well played. Knight e2, but then each one of these little kind of structural transitions feels like a small gain for black, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, certainly this knight's now tied to defending, and
now b4. Now she's making a real virtue of attacking on both sides of the board at once. I sort of, we were a little bit wary of it first time round because it was a middle game and you felt things could rebound. No, I just love the way she's doing it, actually. Very impressive. So f5, yeah, f5 didn't help, I think. She needs to try and hold. Can she play any move that sort of takes the sting out of rook b2 coming, I wonder? I don't know. It's not very easy to see. So take f5, but that takes, that means black no longer has to worry about taking on g5 at any point and can just. I think she's played really well here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how old she is, Anusha. And I think she's a young player, but I can't. It normally says, and it doesn't say on here.
I think she's 11 or 12.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and so rook b1. Okay, I mean, that looks like a bid for at least a little bit of activity and counterplay, but I think feels like what black is doing is definitely coming in first. Oh, I thought she was going to take on c2. Is there a reason not to take on c2? I mean, I guess the point of f5 is that if you can make some checks and take a pawn on f7, then the counterplay becomes a little bit more real. But I really think that I can't see why this would be a problem to compare with having to try and maintain that knight on e2, which is a tough.
What about rook b7 now?
Yeah, if I just go sort of king, I don't know, c8 maybe.
Oh yeah.
In terms of any counterplay, if you try and take on f7, when I take on e2, I'm even defending e6. So
yeah.
And if you defend that knight, I can hit it again with rook e4. That's why I liked rook h4 so much.
Yeah.
It just seems to me like this is really difficult for white. I mean, she still has a big advantage taking on b1, but I kind of like it was very thematic to not worry about that little bit of counterplay from white and just. Unless there's some idea. I mean,
rook f1.
Yeah, rook fc1 might be even here. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I just want, but then I mean, then we have the option of taking on c1 and cashing in on a second pawn. I mean, it might be that now after rook e2, the counterplay is a bit more dangerous. There's a check on b8 and another check coming on the 7th rank. But yeah, I mean, you could sort of see why you would think twice about doing this one with black. But I think you could take on c2, see if white found that, and then proceed accordingly. I mean, sorry, I just want. Did you mean check and then?
Yeah. I think it was in this line with the
rook fb1 here. This is the one where
yeah,
maybe there aren't so many options for black to bail out. You could see. Maybe that one's an interesting one. I'm sure black has ways of doing this, but I take the point. At that point, you're entitled to be a bit nervous about this.
Yeah.
I suspect, I mean, amongst other things, I suspect bishop d8 to c7 isn't a bad way to play because white still has that knight causing problems. But no, this one is not so clear. That's a clever idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So she took on b1.
Yeah.
And then she took on d4. Oh, I think I would have been. I mean, it's not the most enticing of rook endings for white, but I kind of think that's a great bishop and a slightly dubious knight, and I probably would have put whatever efforts I still had into the rook ending rather than the rook and minor piece ending. I mean, something like bishop c5 now would be a pretty glorious square to have that one on. And black's use of time has been pretty impressive as well. Something I could learn from. She does seem to have played all these moves at some speed. Yeah, no, very impressed by that. Very impressed. Let's go back and where should we go next, Harriet?
Yes.
Why don't we
Harriet? Yes.
Yes, maybe Harriet. Let's see if Harriet is actually. So she took the pawn as we suspected, and she avoided the ending. Yeah, this prevents knight c7. That is, and defends the e-pawn. That is obviously the way to go. That's good. So she's made the best possible.
So Zoe's what, a piece?
So Zoe has a piece for 3 pawns, but I think the worst thing of all is it's yet another position. I mean, not worse than being a piece down, but to add to Harriet's woes is the fact that she hasn't really solved her development problems yet.
Yep.
You know, sometimes you solve your development problems by having fewer pieces, but on this occasion,
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Zoe's participating. Yes, sorry. So Zoe, we should say Zoe's been playing a lot of chess at the moment. She's also been doing quite a bit of streaming, and yeah, so which is very nice. So she's Horsey Chess on Twitch. So if you're not following her, then please do. Very nice channel. And I think she's also been doing some work with Danny Gormally on her chess as well.
Oh, has she? Okay, that's interesting. Because I mean, I saw, to be honest, she had a bit of a rough time in the online Olympiad. She seemed to really struggle, and then I was immensely impressed that having had quite a difficult tournament there, she was playing over the board chess at the end of that week, at the very same week.
Yeah.
She went to
Leamington. It was a tough one, that online. With her first game there, she had a winning position, but terrible internet connection. It was
that was really heartbreaking. But
it was terrible.
But the thing was, at Leamington Spa, I wasn't just impressed that she went to Leamington Spa after all that. She played superbly, as far as I can see. I mean, she didn't. Her result was pretty good, but it didn't reflect how well she played. I remember one game where she had, she had an isolated queen pawn, and I thought it looked kind of okay, but then she generated fantastic ideas out of it. I was hugely impressed. I think she can play extremely well. I mean, I think lots of players have a sort of range between how well they play when they're playing well and when they're not.
Yeah, true.
I suspect hers might be quite high, but when she's playing well, I'm really impressed. And well, obviously things are going very well here. She needs, above all, I think she's a player who thinks a lot about her chess, and that's something I can identify with. But 13 minutes, she needs to.
This is it. I mean, she's got a really good position here. She's a piece up for the 3 pawns extra development. Still, she has to make sure she wins it.
No, I mean, it's not easy. I'd rather forgotten that Black could play Queen e5. I mean, obviously, if Black had to play the ending looked totally hopeless. What Harriet's done is very clearly the best chance. And
and also Harriet's been in tough positions before, and I did an interview with her one time, and she said she has sometimes, she gets into bad positions, but sometimes she can still she don't write her off.
Oh, she's a fantastic fighter, and
yes,
I mean, Harriet's not playing that much chess anymore, and as we're sort of go through phases of both getting older and playing less chess, it's never that easy to come back. But she was a fantastically strong player. 3 kids
as well, hasn't she?
Well, 3 kids doesn't make it.
Doesn't help your chess.
Doesn't make it any easier. And I'm really delighted that she's come back to play.
I'm really delighted she's playing.
Amongst other things, I mean, she even said this in an interview to me. She said she thought it was a bit of a shame that there was a kind of a generation who didn't really know much about her or who she was.
Yeah.
And she was incredibly strong. In the 1990s, she was. I mean, I think had she carried on with chess, she would have become a grandmaster.
Yeah, well, she's still really strong as well, because like I've seen, like in between, even when she was just had tiny kids, she was still rocking up to the 4NCL, beating an IM, no problem, and going home again,
Yeah, and she clearly, she loves her chess. Like she's somebody who will kind of enjoy spectating chess as well as playing it. She will, she's a real enthusiast. But she has, an academic career as well, and it's always been, and she has, as you say, 3 children. It's quite a balance to.
Yes, so it's great to see her in action here.
It's wonderful to see her in action, and to have her and Ketty in the same tournament is a real treat. This is tough, but I think she's found exactly the way to set white some problems. Now, I'm guessing that, well, the problem that white has is that bishop f4 is almost a very strong move, but the queen has one square going back to d4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, queen e6 would lose to knight c7, but the queen going back to d4 would then be problematic. So white then wouldn't be able to castle. So castles therefore comes into consideration, but I suspect then Harriet's going to put the question to the white knight with e6. And at that point, if bishop f4, then queen d4 is check. And white has an immediate draw with bishop e3. And one of my hopes about this is that white isn't going to sort of... Hello, what's happened? There's been a move. I was going to say one of my hopes is that white isn't going to get sort of so nervous about the clock that she's going to do that. I think that's a possibility. You know, you're playing someone as strong as Harriet and you only have 13 minutes left, and black has survived to the extent of having 3 pawns for the piece. It's not inconceivable. On the other hand, it may be that after e6, I'm struggling to see a sort of devastating solution. So you see the variation I mean. e6, bishop f4, queen d4 check is the only move.
Yep.
And then bishop e3 is the move which maintains white's cohesion, and then black can go back to e5 again. So that is one possibility, but I think it would be a bit surprising. Can I just go back a move? I'm just wondering, I wasn't really... In this moment, I think I may have missed something. Is knight c7 simply possible here?
Okay, so knight c7. So queen cannot take c7 because of bishop f7 check picking up.
Yep. I mean, I just noticed that the engine is giving white as completely winning, and that could very well be the reason. Oh, it's not the reason, apparently.
No.
I'm just wondering what black can do here. My first thought is to play something like b5 and try and give another exchange. It's going to be quite a hefty material price to pay for all this.
Because the problem for black is if rook b8, then you've got bishop a7 attacking the rook.
Yes.
And the rook doesn't have a square.
That was the plan. But so we were too busy talking about Harriet to notice the simple tactics. But after knight c7, well, there are moves to consider like b5 or possibly even d5. I mean, white needs to be a little bit wary at any moment where she hasn't castled yet. If the engine didn't like b5, what about d5? No, it doesn't like anything. But you see the point. I'm just trying to get black's pieces out very quickly. And okay, after bishop takes, black still has the kind of rook dilemma, but at least now we have a bishop that can develop, possibly. Or maybe we're probably more likely we're just playing e6.
Oh, wait, Gawain's got a bit of a response to our question. If bishop a7, then black Harriet would have queen a5 check picking up.
This is very true. Thank you, Danny.
That was Gawain.
Oh, Gawain. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Gawain. Well, if I just called you Harriet, then I can call Gawain Danny as well. Just show I've gone completely. Okay, no, I mean, it's just this does actually all feel. Oh, this is a queen a5 check.
Hi, Brock Oxon.
Okay, after bishop a7, that's right. Okay, so there's no so immediate thing, but after castles e6, I'm still interested. This is the game, right? This actually happened. And now, as I said, this is the moment where if you're feeling very nervous about your time and you're playing a very strong player, you need the mental strength to avoid a
repetition. So you're thinking you're looking at the repetition: bishop f4, bishop f3, bishop f4, queen d4, and bishop e3.
Yeah, I mean, it is also, it's not. I think the material advantage white already has is such that giving 3 pieces for the queen and avoiding the draw is very unlikely scenario. But I mean, in many, this is just worth.
This is a game full of material imbalances.
Exactly. From a chess point of view, it's worth noting that this exists. But I imagine after queen takes c4, I imagine that the black has to be quite careful about some the bishop needs to stay on a diagonal that stops rook takes f7 and rook f2 or something.
Yeah.
I think if Harriet, if White went for the draw, Harriet would regard that as a significant let-off, and under the circumstances. So I don't know, what other moves does White have? Knight e7 check springs to mind, but any position where White has to remove that problem of Black's development by taking on c8, and then I feel, feels like a slight source of encouragement to Black, I suppose. So has that been played, bishop f4?
Let me check on mine.
Or is that my analysis? Let's just go.
I think that's your analysis.
No, that's my analysis. Okay, so this is the key moment, really. Well, another key moment. There've been plenty of key moments, but knight e7 check, king h8, and then White needs some. I think White would be quite keen to keep that knight on e7 and not have to take on c8 too quickly.
Yeah. So actually, so it's not, there's a lot of, so he's quite short on time, and then there's a lot of different choices for White here, so that doesn't make it any easier.
No, I mean, I think Harriet's done, obviously, the only thing she could of making it as difficult as possible. I mean, we could look back as well at some point whether taking on e4 and then playing rook a2 was practically a better move than playing rook a2 straight away. I mean, there were some quite enticing choices for White back at that stage as well. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, it's when you're winning in a game of chess, choices don't always help.
No, I don't think so at all.
No.
I don't think it's that easy. I really don't.
No, I don't think it's, I mean, it's sort of, if the clock's not ticking and you can sit down and think about all your options, then maybe you can construct a sort of argument where it is relatively straightforward, but I think in practice it's quite hard to, especially as I think it's sort of not impossible that Zoe might have thought at that point she was doing even better than she is. I mean, she might have been totally aware that Harriet had this option, but there were lots of other options where it's easy to think White's just winning immediately, as we pretty much did, I think. So I think we underestimated what Harriet could do.
Yes.
And that's quite, I hope it's easy to do. At least we did it. So, okay, so that's basically where we're at. White can play knight e7 check. I'm looking for the devastation for
bishop f4.
This is not, I think, it's not impossible that she's intending to go for this draw.
Yeah.
And I think Harriet would be
happy with that as well.
Well, I think she'd be very well advised to be grateful for that and not look at giving her queen for 3 pieces. I think she'll realise very quickly that you don't give your queen for 3 pieces in a position where your development is as shaky as hers is. And I mean, that's true if Zoe does this as she has now with 6 minutes left. It might become less true if she sort of did it with 10 seconds left. You've got to be careful you don't think so long that things which otherwise wouldn't have been practical for Black suddenly become a possibility, I suppose. So I don't know how Zoe will, if this does end in a repetition, it's always interesting how the player feels about it, because, you could think that drawing with Harriet is a very good result, which it is. On the other hand, you have that feeling of disappointment that you haven't cashed in as much as you might have.
Yeah, but as you say, like Zoe's good at bouncing back. So if
well, I don't think drawing with Harriet is exactly something you need to bounce back.
Yeah, she'll I don't think it'll throw her off her stride for the rest of the tournament.
No, I don't think so either. I think she's quite tough. So I'm actually expecting this will probably, seems not impossible this will end with a repetition of moves very shortly. Shall we go and have a look?
Anyway, yes, let's go and see and give them they can have a think about that.
Okay, this is interesting. This is kind of what I think Kato would have been hoping for from the position we had before, that White has been put off the stride of going f4 for long enough that Black can play king g7, rook h8. That's the kind of reorganization of pieces I think Black was looking for. Sorry, let me, okay. But but let's just go back a few moves because we were we left the game after G3 with white intending to play F4. And black played Rook E8, which we didn't consider, but that, I suppose in a sense that's another way of trying to say to white, if you're going to go F4 and some E5 or F5, you're going to need to think about the possible consequences on the E file. Putting rooks on the same files as the opponent's queen just makes them think about those kind of. It helps to hold up E5, and F5 has positional sort of drawbacks anyway. So, and of course, if we've talked about Queen B6 as a means of preventing F4, it's also possible that Queen B6 check might be a response to F4.
Yeah.
If white plays F4 here, I mean, it may be that Queen B6 check and then Queen takes B2 isn't a good thing to play with your knight hanging, but it's another thing that white probably has to reckon with and analyse.
Yeah, so
it may well be. So King G2 seems very sensible.
Yeah.
And then I think black is quite keen to be able to play Rook H8, so King G7. Now this is more of a moment for wondering whether white can play F4. What's black doing afterwards? I guess black's taking and going knight D7 again. And then, if it's more obvious than before with the king on G7 that if white plays F5, she's giving away a lot of dark squares again. And if she plays E5, she has to reckon with that rook on E8. I mean, I kind of think black's done all this quite well. And of course, as we know, Ketty missed a real opportunity to play E5 at one point, which would have been quite nasty for black. Queen D2. Rook H8.
H8. So Kata's going to go for it, and
along the H file. I'm not sure exactly how you go for it, but these moves are not a bad idea from a prophylactic angle either, because if white's trying to play F4 and attack, when your own king's when her own king's under a little bit of pressure, she needs to sort of factor that into the equation. Queen D2 looks to me like it might be trying to tee up for some position where white plays E5 and black can't take because the knight on D7 is hanging. So I would have thought this might have been the moment where she would go for F4, but she didn't. She went Rook H1.
Okay,
so it's still quite delicately poised. Now Queen B6, and as we'd noted before, that is probably going to be met by Bishop B3, just holding the queen side.
Yeah.
And this is where we are, I think. Yeah. So white is still white hasn't rushed into F4, but she's still definitely got F4 on the menu, I think. And the question is,
how is it?
How is F4, and what how best should black place her pieces to deal with F4, I suppose.
Yeah, because when F4 comes in, that knight really is.
Well, but as I said before, I think if she rushes into some E5, that's it's black's move, isn't it? Okay, that's why it won't let me go F4. Yeah, I mean, you sort of feel that black has things quite well covered, but I always feel more comfortable in positions where I kind of know what I would do if it was my move. I think, particularly when I'm working with young players, I think that's quite a good test of a position in some ways. It's quite handy if you know what you would do if you had some time. And I'm not exactly sure what I would do as black here if it was my move. She might want to put some rooks on the H file, but there's no obvious breakthrough there, is there?
What about Bishop F6?
I was worried about D6 hanging. Are you going to trap my queen?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. No, I hadn't.
I don't think you are. One reason you might not trap my queen is because I suspect after queen takes Rook D8, I might have the move knight D5. Oh no, then you can take on F2 check. That's kind of dinky.
Oh.
And then take my queen. I suspect that scores as a slightly pretty but spectacularly irrelevant variation.
Yes.
But you kind of got to admire the sheer irrelevance of it. Okay. But it was quickly generated. As it deserved to be.
Yeah. I'll be surprised if she does actually play bishop f6.
Well, I'll probably apologise if you. Queen b4 a move you'd consider? Just, it's a bit committal, isn't it? But you sort of trying to hold up the knight from doing anything, and but I don't think black's really making great waves on the queen side. I don't know, I find black's position quite sort of, there's something quite aesthetically pleasing about it now. But of course, in chess, aesthetically pleasing doesn't always translate into an easy plan. I think her position is well set up for preventing white from doing anything very nasty. But when it comes to the stage of what to do next, I'm less sure.
Yeah, just that. Yeah, it just occurred to me. Do you think she might offer a draw then?
I don't know. We've got Gawain watching, and ever since I did my interview with Gawain, and he said that he just thought that at high level chess now, just random draw offers in positions with a lot of life left had just sort of ceased to be a thing in the way that they once were.
Okay, so just
I kind of always had that. It's one of those moments from those interviews which kind of is always in my mind now, and I kind of think, no, they won't offer a draw. It's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah,
and of course sometimes that's not true, but I think he had a very good point. It's not a thing in the way that it once was, which is obviously great news for chess.
It saves your time as well, thinking about whether or not to offer a draw and all that sort of stuff.
Well, she's made a move. Maybe we should.
Let's see what she's actually done.
97 she's done. Okay, so that's one approach, which is essentially to predict f4. That's pretty sensible, actually, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're going to use the position of the knight on e5, unless you can use the position of the knight on e5 in some way, why not move it back and say, look, if you go f4, then I'm going to get a sort of... Then at that point, I can then decide where I want my pieces, not trying to guess that you're going to go f4. And of course, it gives the option after f4. It may be that one of the move black would like to make, which she wouldn't have had available otherwise, is another knight move. So, you know, maybe after f4 takes, she might even go knight f6, trying to come to h5 and sort of suggest that f4 pawn isn't very comfortable or something. I think that's a very pragmatic move.
Oh,
I don't think
Harry and Harriet have. Let's just step back in. I think they maybe have gone for that drawing line.
Yeah, I think in all but a very theoretical sense, it was Zoe's decision rather than Harriet's.
Yeah.
I don't think Harriet was realistically going to give her queen for the three pieces. So, okay, I mean, I have some sympathy with Zoe here, because trying to play winning positions, or very good positions, which have a lot of complexity still when you only have a few minutes on the clock, is something which hasn't always served me well. So I kind of, I'm sympathetic, and a draw with Harriet is, a
good result.
A result you would have settled for before the game, probably. So yes, a very interesting. I mean, it's a very interesting draw. Obviously, it's not a flawless game, but it illustrated quite a lot of the tricks and things in the opening as well. It was a nice game to commentate on, because you can impart quite a lot of interesting information, even when missing things like Queen A5 check. So. Okay, I mean, I also did latch on to the fact that when you're very short of time, that is one obvious way to try and handle things. Yeah, it was a little bit of a shame for Zoe in terms of what might have been, but it's, as I say, a good result, and she will be doing fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Interesting. So let's have a look at the others. We haven't been to some of these for a while. Let's have a look at Lindsay and Audrey. Okay, so we've got a bit of Keith's minority attack we were talking about.
Oh yes, we were.
Slightly well, I mean, there's some special things going on, like the b pawn is pinned, so the usual b4 is certainly not on the table. I think the main gain from black's point of view is that the white b pawn has moved to b3, which creates a sort of permanent bit of a weakness on c3. The question, I suppose, would be, is that in itself going to be enough to win the game? mean, it's clearly black has the advantage because white doesn't really have any counterplay on the other wing.
Yeah,
The
because
only
Audrey could presumably just move her queen out the way to like b7 or b6.
Yeah, she can try to play b4. Alternatively, I mean, one very straightforward plan with kind of taking advantage of the fact that white isn't obviously doing anything. One thing you might check is how good or bad it is for white if you exchange the knight on e5 and simply tripled on the c file with your rooks in front of your queen, playing via queen b7, so you have to defend the b pawn along the way, and simply seeing if you put all your pieces on the c file and then play c4.
Yeah,
is that good? And I don't know if that's good, but it's a bit cumbersome. It's one thing to think about. I mean, it's clearly more pleasant for black. Very interesting that the time is almost identical.
Yeah.
So, sometimes when you see a situation where one player obviously has more initiative in the position and has had for a while, it will take its toll on the clock. Well, maybe she's going for something like this.
I think the women's event is on a slightly faster time control than the Open was, in that I think they don't get extra time at move 40.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been on Zoe's mind as well. You're going to be playing the rest of the position she had pretty much after a while on increment all the way through. I think that's quite a big factor in the decision if you're going to get a chunk of time at move 40.
No, there was still a lot of game left in that, wasn't there?
There was a lot of game to be playing on increment all the way. I mean, occasionally you find players get into sort of really into the zone and playing on increment becomes something of a pleasure. I mean, I remember David Howell winning a tournament, which I mentioned in the book, where he was basically playing on increment for ages and just totally got into the zone and just could play as if he had lots of time. But you don't want to rely on that too often.
No. Can't be good for your nerves.
Well, no, it's definitely not good for your nerves. If that was really the therapy your nerves needed, you'd have a problem, wouldn't you? Okay, so it's very clear that black had the weakness in inverted commas of that black has double pawns, I think, is almost irrelevant. That probably, if anything, slightly slows down any attack white could generate on the king side. This is all about whether the weakness on c3, and I suppose you could argue the slightly loose pawn on e5. It's all about whether those are really enough to win the game. And I think it's pretty safe to say that even if they're not, it's not going to be a hugely pleasant experience trying to defend them. One way black could speed up the plan I just mentioned would be to play rook c5, I think, which defends the b pawn without needing to find some independent way of defending it. And white can never play b4 because black will settle a rook on c4. So rook c5 and then queen c7 is actually a very quick way, by attacking the e-pawn as well, a very quick way of trying to implement the plan I just mentioned.
Well, you could even do, if you fancied it, rook c5, rook c6 and queen c7 and get the queen at the back. I guess.
Yes. But I don't think you need that. The only important thing is to have the rook at the front so that you don't have the queen taking a rook on c2. Because you have three pieces on the c file, if you get, if you take once with the front rook, it's fine if the queen is second in the row, if you see what I mean. So I think rook c5, queen c7 is a quick way of trying to implement that plan. And it's, it may be that white can then play queen d4 and hold things up for a short time, but then you get Keith-style minority attack themes like you just play a5 to prepare e4, and it's a bit unpleasant for white, to say the least.
And we know that Audrey's very familiar with Keith's minority attacks, because Audrey's been a regular in. We've been doing on this channel a lot of commentaries on Quarantine League and various things that Keith's been playing in, and Audrey's Gigantobet in some of those events.
Okay.
Has been playing,
I just realised that something is wrong with what I said. When I said rook c5 and queen c7, I forgot that it is actually important to have the two rooks in front of the queen, because after b4, white can play c4.
Yeah.
And at that point, you actually do need the rooks coming first. So, yes, you're actually right, I think, that you need to put the rook on c5 and maybe c6 and then queen c7.
That's easy enough to achieve, isn't it? And white's not doing it.
I think it's easy enough to achieve because your rook on c5 can never land in trouble, because the c4 is such a safe square; it can never really have any problems with it. But I guess there are other ways of doing this as well. I mean, a5 now isn't a silly move, trying to soften things up a bit first.
Yeah.
You know, white needs to be a very patient defender of passive positions with not many. You know, most players play a lot better when they have some counterplay, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Not many people just enjoy passively defending. So I think this is tough on that basis. It's the almost complete lack of white having got anywhere on the king side, which makes it unpleasant for her, I think. But we'll see. Let's try which game. There's one game we haven't been to for a while. Board 4, I think.
Yes.
Neve. Yes, of course.
Yes, the attack.
And to say a lot has happened here would be something of an understatement.
Oh, we're in an endgame now.
I think we'll go right back to the start of the game and see where things went from where we were last here.
Yeah, good game from Zoe. Hi, Peter Dragon. Yeah, because I think she wasn't. It certainly wasn't all opening prep as well. That because no,
a3. Look, I mean, I don't think you play that line as prep. I think the person who said that Zoe had fallen for a small trick is probably right. I don't think you play that as prep. I think you find a3 as very good improvisation at the board. You know?
Yeah. Peter Dragon played Harriet's mum at the Leighton Buzzard Chess Congress. Excellent. I used to play in the Leighton Buzzard Chess Congress. That would have been so many years ago, though.
I'm not sure if Harriet's mum is still playing. If Adam
was still here, when did I see Harriet's? I saw Harriet's mum at Bury St Edmunds. That would still be
a couple of times.
It would still be like 3 years ago, I suppose. But she was playing then.
I've seen her most recently. Oh, was she? Okay, that's good. I've seen her most recently at Bunratty, where she mostly wasn't playing, but she may have done as well.
No, I mean Harriet's mum was playing, but like Harriet or Adam weren't there. She was, playing of her own free will, sort of thing.
No, I think she's definitely someone who played of her own. You make it sound like most people have actually marched to the board in hand.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure I do. Yeah, no. So Queen E7. So yeah, this was the F. I mean, I really, really liked what Neve had done up to this point, and then I was a little skeptical of F5 because I thought it gave Black more of a fighting chance to sort of control some dark squares and things, and I wasn't quite sure why White wouldn't just prepare. I mean, as you know, I was quite keen on White going A4, but failing that rook E1 prior to F5 seemed like a good way to prepare. But she went straight in, and yeah, she took back with the bishop. I don't know. This feels like it's slightly looser for White than anything needed to be. Okay, so she's taken with pieces because she still wants ready to play on the F file. So G5.
Yeah, G5 she's got in mind, I'm sure.
Presumably sort of a threat, although it may not be a threat because Black can possibly meet it with bishop takes E5 and then knight FD7. And actually, in that context, G5 might not be a move you'd massively have wanted to play. I think it's also fair to say something like rook E1 is rook AE1 is again a good move to follow up with. But I mean, again, I said one of Black's problems in this line was the bishop on C8, and by playing F5 so quickly, White kind of solved that for her a bit. So I do think what White did was a little bit impatient. Okay, Queen E6. Yeah, I understand the motivation for that move because it's clear that White's kind of attacking and it's nice to try and get queens off. But positionally, I'm not sure. No, I think the move makes a lot of sense. G5, okay. Takes, G5. This is all very logical. D takes E5 and knight FD7. I mean, Black has Black has a bit of an issue with the F7 pawn being attacked immediately. That is clearly what is going on.
So, like if White doubles rooks, say.
I'm pretty certain White will have doubled rooks. Yeah, there we go.
That's what she did.
Okay, yeah, that's why I'm not so fond of Queen E6 because it does seem to have speeded up White's play. Whereas some of the positional things on the White squares, which are looking okay for Black, would probably have looked okay for Black even without allowing White this possibility. And well, the problem now is that presumably if rook E7, there is bishop A3, thus making F7 quite hard to defend.
Oh, you actually can't at all, can you?
Well, you can play rook e7, bishop a3, rook takes e5.
E5.
But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I think of that, because g5 is hanging as well. I mean, that looks like white's position is more active than it need have been allowed to be, but that may well be quite sensible. Let's speed up a bit because they actually don't have that much time, so the current position might be worth thinking about as well. So, she went h4. Okay, I think that's probably right. I think bishop a3, rook takes e5, rook f7, rook takes g5 check probably worked well enough for black. So now I guess the argument is she's defended g5, so she's threatening that.
So maybe black should play b5 so that if bishop a3, you got b4.
I can see you've been attending Keith's classes as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for b5. And so did she. That's good. Okay. Yep, I think that looks like a sensible move. That's a really interesting position, actually, because, I sort of felt black should be quite enjoying the situation on the light squares, but there's a few dynamic problems to overcome as well. I mean, what's the best way to do this? I mean, b5 gives white a couple of new possibilities, but I think that's going to end in mid-sentence because they're not as interesting as I thought. I mean, c4 is one move I might have a look at here, just to, because if black took on c4 and played b4, then I would gain a square for e4 on e4 for the knight, which might have implications for trying to attack f7. And if black didn't respond to c4 like that, then my attempt to play bishop a3 might come into play again.
Yeah.
But I don't like something about c4. I don't fully trust, but it has some ideas. How else does white try and press this initiative against f7 before black consolidates, I suppose?
Yeah, because you could try and get the knight in somehow.
Yeah, well, that's what
you'd have to go
f3. e5 allows the c6 square, so knight f3, but knight e6 just seems to cover that. I can't see the knight going anywhere very interesting. I mean, I think black's done this well since Neve's slightly rushed f5 move, I think. c4, there you go. Okay. Yeah. I do understand this. Yeah, okay. And I think there's a lot to be said for this move. I think the e4 square may well count for more than the downside of the move. But, when you're allowing d takes c4 and b4, you have to be a little bit careful there isn't going to be some scary queenside pawn coming later. D takes and g6. Oh, I mean, there are things to like about g6, but you also, in the context of white suddenly having knight e4, you have to think that that makes you a little bit nervous because the knight g6 makes knight e4 a more enticing prospect in some way.
But does this pick up the e-pawn though?
Well, perhaps. But, if I go rook somewhere and you take the e-pawn and then I go knight e4, there are suddenly some knight f6 check followed by unpleasant pins in the air. Now, maybe black has time. You see what I mean? So if rook let's just put the rook on a random square, f2 or f4 or something.
Yeah.
And then knight takes e5. I mean, I haven't checked this, but my first thought is that knight e4 now looks a bit scary because knight f6 check, king somewhere, and then knight g4 or something like that will be a very unpleasant.
Yeah, and this diagonal is really nice, isn't it?
Yeah, the diagonal is pretty strong. That's what I was hoping. Yeah, that's why knight takes e5 shouldn't be undertaken without a bit of thought. Now, maybe there's knight d7 here or something, but sort of feel like there should be some way to do this for white as well. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that holds things together. But actually, there's this, I mean, I can't remember quite how we got here, but there's a c takes b5 in this position as well.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, there's just an idea of some of the things that are going on. So g6, yeah, that's the thing. Because black didn't actually deal with this tension on the queen side, there's c takes b5 for white in various positions as a response to winning the e-pawn as well, I guess. So she played rook f4. I apologise, Neve, for calling it a random move. It was a perfectly good square. I was just illustrating rook moves. Really.
Yeah. Black doesn't need to take on e5 straight away, though. Black can do other
Black
things.
didn't take on e5. Black played knight c5, but actually with b5. She's trying to go for knight
d3, isn't she?
Okay, so why is that problematic? One thing could be that no, the knight could go to e6 as well. So,
well, I suppose if you go.
Oh, wait a minute! Is he takes
Bishop
b5
A3.
and knight d3, bishop a3? Is that a move?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, maybe that just. I mean, that doesn't feel quite so exciting to me positionally as some of the things I was wanting to do, but materially, it might make a lot of sense. And that's exactly what she did. She's very tactically alert, I think.
Yeah.
It's probably. I think that's what I discovered in that symbol, actually. Okay. Rook d7. Yeah, I wonder if. I mean, it's incredibly. No, it's not very obvious where you should go. I mean, somewhere like b7 at least sort of hits the b pawn in theory, but you also it's very difficult to leave the f7 pawn. Rook d7. What's the move for white now?
Rook e4.
Is that doing more than just defending the e pawn? And after that, I feel I because knight e4 isn't coming. I wonder if I then sort of get a move to go knight e6, or I could also consider taking the e pawn because d2 is hanging. I wonder if there's something nastier than that.
Oh, what? Knight e4.
Well, knight e4, black can take the rook. Knight f6 check, king h8, probably. Oh, that might be quite bad. Yeah, knight e4 is an interesting move. Let's see what she... Yeah, it's very, very, very much in keeping with her style, I think. Very direct. Direct is all right. I don't mind a bit of direct. Takes check, king g7. Yeah, I probably was wrong, actually. I was thinking that bishop takes f8 was a problem, but I'm not sure it is a huge problem. I think black's main problem is that she won't be able to take back.
Oh, you could take on f8 now, actually, and then...
Well, no, that's what I meant. But after taking on f8, rook takes, knight takes d7, black can play rook to d8. And she's not going to lose major material. I don't know if there are any knight checks as well. That would need to be checked. Apologies. But okay, but it does seem like a very reasonable move to take on f8, and it's probably how white reached a good rook ending. Yep. Okay. Some knight check is obviously possible now, but I don't see one that materially alters the situation that both knights are going to get captured. Actually, black probably needs to be quite careful that she does take white's knight because it is in a rather supremely excellent position for supporting b7.
B pawn, yeah.
B pawn to b8. So probably rook d8 is the move, and then that's how we got this really very good rook ending for white, I think. It's a very
that's been quite an enterprising sequence by white because nearly every move there she's
I think she's done very well. I think she calculates pretty well, and she and this aggression is very good, and I like the way she did that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think this is a horrible ending for black because the b pawn is so strong.
Yeah. What would you do? Like a4 and then...
Well, also it's quite handy for white, I think, thinking about it, that white... I think the advanced white pawns here aren't weaknesses. I think they sort of help to keep a grip on the king side. But you can imagine that black can try at some point to, if the rook's not on the f file, you can try to attack e5, play h6, and try and get them moving. But I think they do. They're not badly placed for stopping counterplay. Whose move is it here? It's white's, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Rook d5 would be a sort of minor threat in that. Well, it's a threat to the extent you could try and win the e pawn back. Well, I mean, I'm not sure what I'd play here. Rook a4 feels like a candidate because it does defend our a pawn against the threat of rook d1 and rook d2, as well as attacking black's a pawn. But after, but it's not a beautiful square for a rook.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of position. If we win the A pawn, then I think the fact that our rook is clumsy on A5 doesn't matter so much because things on the king side are pretty slow.
Yeah, checkmate a lot saying rook A4.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a move to consider. Ah, B6.
Oh,
good for her. Yeah, sorry, I completely forgot that she had rook F6 defending that laterally, which makes it quite a nice move to consider.
Yes.
Okay. Rook D1 check. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Oh, sorry, it doesn't make sense because rook B1 is going to be very useful. I forgot she had rook F1 there. Rook D1 check might not help. I'm trying to see if she can find any way to attack that where white has to sort of defend it a bit awkwardly.
Yeah, no, rook D1.
I mean, rook B7, yes, but this, I want to do it on where my rook's on an active square, not on B7. Yeah. So, for example, if black went rook D5, is that a move to consider? Trying to play rook B5.
Yeah.
With the point that if white went something like rook F3, trying to go rook B3, we can play A4 and stop rook B3. I think that's a pretty important element of it. It might be that... Yeah, what about this? I've just seen another very unpleasant feature of the position on the king side. Does white have the possibility of playing E6 here? With the idea that when you take, I just play rook C4, and then if black's king is restricted to the 7th and 8th ranks, white might pretty much be queening immediately.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so what would black do? So say black does just go in behind the pawn.
Yeah, then I just go rook C7 check and then B7, and you can't stop it because the king's on the 8th rank. I just go rook C8 check next. I think that's probably the point, and a very good point. Yeah. I think rook D5 without that might not be so simple. I mean, I think white's got very good position anyway, but that's a very nice clinical way of finishing off. That's a nice way of making use. It's a kind of links between the middle game and the end game. Having that pawn on G5 clamps the black king into those back ranks. And of course, the nice thing about the pawn sack is that one of the squares that stops the king coming forward is the one you've sacked the pawn on, which I find aesthetically quite pleasing. You may not, but I do. So, yeah, I think that's a rather nice variation from white's point of view, and obviously a bit depressing from black's. But the E6, I think that finishes the show, doesn't it? So she went rook D1 check, rook F1, rook D7. I mean, given that E6 was in the position, this may turn out to be a reasonable way of doing it.
Yeah.
Having said that, is E6 a move here?
So E6 takes.
This may just turn out to be an illusion, but it feels to me like E6 takes rook C1 is still very dangerous.
Yeah. So
it's a pretty nice idea.
King F7, I guess.
Yes, and then I just go rook C7.
And
you're in range. You're in range if I exchange, but I can get
B7, aren't you?
I can get and your rook is pinned, so you can't come back in any way.
No.
You have to play rook versus queen, which I think I have rather a lot of ways in.
Not.
So that's actually pretty strong, I think. I mean, I haven't.
Yeah.
People in the chat can tell me if I'm talking nonsense there, but I think E6 is a pretty strong idea, which might have finished the game immediately. Rook B1 is also a very thematic idea, which finishes the game more slowly, probably. But obviously, E6 is appealing if it's there. So I think white's just getting to C5. I'm just doing a bit of counting. That always takes a while. Doesn't come naturally. Yeah, white's king gets to C5 when black gets to D7. Yeah, so that is very good news for white's chances.
This looks completely winning now.
I mean, it's just a typical rook and pawn ending where rook behind the pawn is absolutely optimal, which is why I immediately didn't like rook D1 check. But the E6 idea was so strong that maybe there was nothing else anyway. I mean, I think Neve played really well.
Yeah, no, really nice game, actually.
Really nice game. And now I guess that you just go rook d1 check and king c6, and that's very bad news for black. Okay, she's still fighting. What's the quickest way to do this? It's got to be said that rook d6 looks very close to being Zugzwang. Yet another nice feature of these kingside pawns being clamped down. After any move, after a3 even, does black have a constructive move?
That's a good question, because the rook can't come off that rank.
If the rook goes back to b7, we have rook d8 check, and if it goes to, well, I suggested rook d6 because there's rook e6 check, but I mean, if it leaves the second rank, we have b7 check, but it can go to e8. That might be its only sort of legal square.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, it's very unpleasant anyway. Rook d5, that's a very reasonable way of doing it. She's giving herself a possible route to a5 as well if she needs it. Rook b6. Oh, king b5. I would have been inclined. I think I'm inclined to go rook d6 here just because rook e8's the only move.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what the move will be after that. But king b5 is also going to be very strong. And king, well, she just wins. And now I think by putting the king on a7 probably.
Yeah, she's doing it.
Okay, she's not going to put it on a7 at this moment, but okay, so that forces her to have another little think.
All right.
Maybe I think we're back. I think she's actually achieved a better version of the Zugzwang, one where rook e8 isn't the move. So if she goes rook d6 now, is there a move? I don't think there is one that I can see because black can't leave the second rank for b7 reasons again, and I don't actually see. I mean, I hadn't realised when we entered the ending quite the extent to which white's aggressive middle game play would mean that the clamped black kingside just means there's zero counterplay, whereas often in these kind of endings there's a little bit of counterplay. It's really nice from her. But I mean, it's difficult to know to what extent a player realises during the game that what they're doing when they're attacking in the middle game is going to have great end game implications as well. But it's a nice, from the point of view of the smoothness of the game, it's really lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, f5 was about the only move she's played that I would really criticise, I think. Okay, no, I think that's very bad news for black, and I think rook d6 or something, unless I'm missing something, rook d6 feels like a good way of proving that that is game over. Because, now with the...
Tricky here for Shambavi, and there's probably not a defence at this point, I guess.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, Shambavi,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, there's probably not a defence indeed, yeah. Okay. We should probably revisit board 2 just on the basis that it's showing black a lot better now, which is
so that's
interesting.
Katarzyna Toma on board 2.
Oh, she's gone for an h4 plan rather than an f4 plan. And you notice Ketty's also got rather little time at this point. I mean, neither of them have got a whole bundle of time, but Ketty is seriously down on the clock. So... Okay, so I mean, we were talking about her knight d7 move partly being about finding another move for the knight after if white plays f4. But if white doesn't play f4, of course, the knight is has its own ideas anyway. So knight c5 is a more active way of trying to make use of it, I suppose. And this is an important moment because now I suspect that... I'm just checking that white couldn't have considered trying to take on d6 here. So just seeing whether queen d4 check, bishop f6, queen takes d6, rook d8 really does cause trouble, or whether white still has this knight d5 move.
Oh, that was...
that's beautiful. No, that's very nice. So she doesn't. So queen d4 check, bishop f6, takes, rook d8, and now I think knight d5. Oh no, knight d5.
Knight d5. Can we do this? Because we had.
I was getting confused. I was thinking there was queen takes b3, but f6 is hit, so with check. So that would certainly not be a good way.
Oh, you can't.
Black has to take the queen.
Takes.
And okay, I think black's doing fine in this position because b2's on prees and stuff, but I don't think white's, I think white is not immediately in trouble there. So okay, that's one interesting thought, I hope. What else to do? Queen f2. Okay, that makes pinning the knight. That makes some sense. But the nice thing about knight c6, it does give black the possibility of trying to put the bishop on the diagonal it would most like to be on, which she may well have started moving her rooks. Yeah, so that's very clearly a rook d8 with the intention of then playing bishop f6.
F6, yeah.
She's kind of got this optimal setup for her minor pieces. Despite everything, I might be wrong, but my hunch is that white should still try to play f4 at some point. And the moment when the rook has left e8 feels like perhaps as good a moment as any.
Oh, so you would think f4 now in this position?
Well, I don't think. I think black's played this well, and I feel like I'm trying to equalise with white now.
Yeah.
But we've got the knight pinned. Wait a sec. It may just be that. Nope, that's not true. Okay, so I mean it's the move I want to play rather than the h4 that she played, I think. But okay, Ketty's put her rook on h1, so maybe she thinks that h4 to h5 is now a more dangerous option anyway.
Now, of course, these two are both quite short on time now.
Yeah, they're both short on time. I think time is going to play some role in all this.
Yeah, because we're still really in the middle game, and
I think Ketty's been a little bit hesitant deciding whether or not to play f4. I'm sure there was some. Well, not sure, but I suspect there was some moment at which that was the best way to make some trouble for black, because black's position has a kind of pleasant, smooth flow about it if you don't do that, doesn't it? So her bishop is now being improved as well. Her pieces are just improving. Oh, queen e3. I think that might have allowed. Did that allow knight takes a4?
Oh, so let me see. Knight takes a4.
Well, I'm just wondering why the computer's evaluation would suddenly change. And I had been assuming that the queen needed to be defended in order for knight takes a4 not to be a thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Certainly it's something to consider when you put your pieces on undefended squares. Tactics like that can sometimes happen. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the end of the world for white, but it's certainly a step in the wrong direction, I would have thought.
Hello, Vice Monsters.
Hello, who?
Vice Monsters.
Of course, how silly of me. Yeah. Okay.
He was playing in the championship.
Ah, yes.
I think Steve, isn't it?
So knight a4 seemed to be possible to me, but she played queen c7. Okay.
We is monsters. It's not Vice Monsters. It's we is monsters.
Oh, we is monsters. It's very Germanic interpretation.
Names. You can read them in different ways.
That's great. Yeah, queen c7 is a slight concession. I think queen e3 probably shouldn't have been possible. Okay, so I think you could argue, given the strength of both these players, that's already a moment where time is playing a role, I think. A little.
Yeah, you don't want to play something like hugely committal, do you? Sometimes.
No, but I think knight takes a4 is just. I mean, queen e3 was just a tactical error, sort of thing that happens when you're short of time, and black also missed it presumably.
Yeah.
Bishop c4. Okay, so yeah, I can see why you might not want that always to be on prees to the knight, even though in general I think the knight is doing the right thing by not taking it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe knight takes b3 is something to consider in that position. I just rather like black's knight on c5, but bishop c4 makes sense because it removes that option. Rook e8. That's interesting to me because I actually thought the rook was doing a good job on h8, making sure that h4 was unattractive and also probably making f4 less attractive.
Yeah, black.
As we said before, I think it's not easy to find moves in this position. I mean, finding the next stage of the plan is not. They're not self-evident.
Katarzyna Toma, so very strong player as well. Can you just scroll a minute? I'll just see her rating as well. I think she's 2300 something as well.
Something, but she's
50. But I think she.
I'm not even sure that are those FIDE ratings or are they some kind of national ratings?
I think that they are FIDE ratings.
Okay, she certainly has been.
But anyway, she's
considerably higher than that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think I think she might have, in terms of ECF ratings, I have a feeling she has a very high online rating or something like that. She's been playing a lot of online chess pretty well, I think. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not surprised. She was playing in the Polish league recently as well.
Okay, so I mean, as a result of Rook E8, I don't think necessarily Black should have allowed this, but of course, Black may have just been tempting White to be too ambitious. Maybe it is perfectly okay. White played H4, so all the way through I was arguing for F4 rather than H4, but now F4 has become impossible. She's finally played H4, possibly a bit rushed because it's so difficult to find moves without a plan in time trouble. It's sometimes better to have not the best plan, but still a plan, just because it enables you to find moves much more quickly. And believe me, time trouble is the one thing I speak about with great authority.
You know all about it, Peter.
I know all about time trouble. So, yes, Rook H. Oh, Queen E7. Okay, so she's trying to stop H5 by indirect means, or at least trying to discourage it. Trying to say, okay, if you play H5, I'm going to have something like Bishop G5, and you're going to have to weaken yourself in the center. Obviously, before I was arguing for F4, but if White's going for it with H4, we don't necessarily want to be weakening ourselves in the center as well. However, the consequences of H5, Bishop G5, F4 aren't blindingly obvious to me. And
I would say White must be feeling nervous on the king's side, though.
Well, I would say White's probably feeling a bit happier than she was just to have this plan, because Black could have prevented that plan altogether. But yes, I imagine with the time situation, both sides are feeling quite nervous. It's also fair to say after Queen E7, sorry, this didn't occur to me straight away, but it's probably the most important thing. D5 is something.
D5, yes. Checkmate a lot's just pointed that out
D5
as well.
is in the position for Black, and that's a serious consideration. Okay. H5 anyway. Wow. Okay, so now if D5, I guess that H takes G6 sets some serious problems. At least it's not something you'd want to be making decisions about with a few seconds left. And if Rook goes back to H8 again now? So there's Rook H8, there's Bishop G5, there's D5, all sort of vaguely on the table. Rook H8 looks...
Gone Rook H8. But we could just go, for White, could just go H6 now. We
could, but then when you've closed up the H file, what do you do next, I suppose? You've got to be you've got to be fairly wary of going H6 when you haven't. I mean, if you can then follow with the F pawn as well, maybe, but there's quite a lot. After King H7, it's not obvious to me that Black's in grave danger. It's like a lot of those Sicilian, there's a lot of those Sicilian positions where sometimes Black even allows White to take on H6 so long as they're not kind of forced to take back. So I'm not sure that's the way. It might be. I wonder what Ketty's got in mind. I mean, it might be that there are more dynamic chances if you can make Black take the H pawn. So just linking the rooks with Rook D1 or something. But my main worry then is that this D5 move is going to be strong. Yeah. By the way, if Black does go D5 at some point, White can at least consider Bishop takes D5, C takes, Knight takes D5, which, in time trouble has, apart from anything else, the effect of completely altering the nature of the position. It becomes a whole massive crazy tactics, which is...
So what happens is then White can get the piece back, or it's just a sacrifice?
Well, I think, we're threatening F6 probably, particularly if we can still throw H6 check in. So the queen, it could be that Black has to play Rook takes D5, in which case I think the two pieces for a Rook thing isn't such a bad deal for White if they're making a lot of mess. It's just a thought that is in the position HG. Okay, that's a move. There was this choice of closing the H file with H6 check, which I didn't like, particularly because it was closing the H file. But this one is kind of opening the H file. But after Rook takes H1 and Rook H8 check, there's no reason to suppose that's going to be White's rather than Black's. If you see what I mean. White has as much.
To me, like Black has quite a promising attack.
Well, possibly. Certainly
getting overexcited for Black here.
There's no sort of intrinsic reason to think that it's going to be White who has all the fun on the H file anymore. No. Could well be Black. Rook takes H1 and Rook H8 check next is what I would expect. Oh, she just took. That's very calm.
Keeping it in reserve.
Yeah, but also allowing, well, yeah, it's true, actually. I mean, it seems to help black in other ways, too, because, if white now links rooks with what rook dd1, then this d5 break seems stronger than before, because I'm less worried about all this bishop takes d5 stuff. Maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe I should still be worried about that. I don't know.
Now
it's an incredibly interesting position. I'm quite keen to sort of keep in touch with what they do in real time here. Because
is this real time?
Rook e2 is very passive. That feels like a move which is designed to stop d5, but it kind of concedes the fact that black is the one going to have the fun on the h file. And that can't be ideal. So given how much the engine dislikes it, I wonder if rook takes h1, king takes bishop e5 is already very dangerous, because then f4 is met by queen h4 check.
Yeah, that looks
like what you'd play. Rook h8 check. That's also probably fine.
Yeah,
slightly less direct, but it's difficult to imagine we're going to find.
I could still imagine bishop e5 being.
Now black at least has to reckon with f4 after bishop e5.
Okay.
No, I think that's. Yeah. But no, actually, it maybe that loses immediately. Maybe queen h4, f takes e5, queen h1 is just mating, actually. Or winning the queen. Let's just check that. So I think, in principle, black would like to play bishop e5. Bishop e5. If white goes f4, then queen h4 is threatening the f pawn, and if takes, check here. And I was thinking rook h2 and rook h3 winning the queen, which is good enough.
That looks good. Yeah.
I think that's probably good, actually. Yeah. I think we might settle for the queen. Controversially.
Checkmate is saying bishop takes c3 and queen h4.
Well, maybe, but that may also be good as well. I'm quite encouraged by what I'm saying here. I think bishop queen h4 is pretty good too. Bishop takes c3. Did you say bishop takes c3? That's always met by check.
Oh yes, checkmate slots just admitted that as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of quite keen to. I think
the line
on the dark squares if I can. I think queen h4 is very nasty here. I think bishop e. So check is okay, and bishop e5 is a very good move, but she's gone queen e5.
Queen e5. Is
that right? Rook g2. Yeah, I don't like queen e5. Bishop e5 is the move you should play if you can play it, I think, because it brings the queen to h4 and it controls all the dark squares so neatly. I mean, okay, black's not going to be doing badly for dark square control anyway.
Yeah.
Now, if black doesn't think that she's going to deliver checkmate here, she could play queen d4 probably and try and move to an ending where she wins the a pawn.
Yeah.
That strikes to me as.
I think you're right, but I'd have preferred checkmatey things.
I'd have preferred the checkmate. I mean, as commentators, you obviously prefer.
As a commentator, you usually do.
Oh, she's preferring checkmatey things.
Oh, she's going for checkmate. Yeah.
I mean, queen d4 is probably not a bad practical move, as long as you think.
We as monsters, you're right. Queen h5.
But queen h5, okay. But now the king has a route out, and it may or may not be a convincing one, and it's obviously unpleasant being attacked in time trouble. But so what now? What's coming next? Are there more? There are more moves already. Yeah, bishop e5 struck me as the move that should have already happened. Now, okay, it's white's move. Well, I mean, there was no doubt for a while now that it was black taking the initiative, but this one is not so clear to me as it was.
I nearly got for the same thing as checkmate. I was looking at bishop c3. Okay,
knight e2. That's a good move to try and cover some squares, but it may or may not be too late.
Might block the king as well, though.
It might, yeah, that's true. But I think queen h1 is met by rook g1 now, whereas before it was probably. Oh, no, it was met by rook g1 anyway, but then the king had the e2 square. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's also the possibility of a switch back to the f file with rook f8, but I think f4 is sort of legal at the moment. If black grabbed a pawn on b2, which would be
what I was thinking,
unprincipled, I wonder if then white can go c3 and at least there's rook f8. That's what I sort of thought might happen. But the engine's impressed. Okay, so I would have thought white, I've been advocating f4 for a while now. Does it lose here? F4. I'm not sure, because if bishop takes, knight takes g5, white can just calmly move the king, and black can't take on f4. So.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff.
It is exciting stuff, and yeah. So f4, because you don't have to. You can kind of leave it, can't you?
Well, you got to defend f3, but you could definitely do so by other.
Black could leave it. Like if white plays f4.
Oh yeah, black can ignore that. Well, maybe queen h1 check is an interesting move then, because rook g1's met by queen takes e4, precisely because you can leave.
Played king f2.
Oh, it all feels a bit loose, doesn't it?
I'm just looking at queen h4.
Maybe it may well be a good move. It seems a slight shame when you've pinned white down to defending f3 that you then. But I can't see a way of.
Well, what else? Do we put?
Oh, wait a minute. Queen h4 check. Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, because now king f1's met by knight takes e4, perhaps. But king g1 is. Oh gosh, he's met by queen e1, mate. I didn't see that one. That's a bit important.
Oh, so king f1, knight e4. Oh, well, yeah, just because of the pin.
Well, just because of the pin and the fact that you're threatening rook takes f3 check then as well, and knight d2 check, winning a queen and mating or something. My first thought when I said knight takes e4 was I was worried if I was allowing some counterplay against g6, but if there's rook takes f3 check, I rather think the counterplay will be a bit limited.
So knight e4 here.
I think knight e4 I mean, queen e4 wins a possibly healthy pawn, but knight takes e4 is definitely what you're more interested. Okay, so is there a way out? Yep, looking very scary for white indeed. Okay, so
it's the last game going from looking at the live stream. So, okay,
g3. So I think rook takes, unless I've missed something, rook takes f3 sees her off. No, it clearly does, because you're even taking the queen with check.
Yeah,
that's an attention to detail, isn't it? Not content with winning the queen, we want to take it with check.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh dear, poor Ketty. This is a bit nasty.
Well, you see, this is a wide.
There we go.
A wide open British, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very entertaining stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually, sorry, I was going on about it being all done with checks. It's actually forced mate.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, there's queen e1 at the end after knight f3. Yeah. Okay. This is all gone. I'm afraid it's mate in 3. A very well played attack. I think there were one or two moments where I thought she could have done even better, but particularly towards the end when they got down to so little time, it's beautifully well played.
Yeah. This final sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a lovely win there for Katarzyna Toma, which takes her into the lead in the British Championships. I think I'm right in saying it. I actually haven't checked that, so I will check.
Oh, is she the only player?
Jointly lead. Let's see. 2 out of. Yeah, because Audrey, I think, had a bye the first round. So she's on.
Like she did, and she's just beaten the other player on 2. Oh, yeah. who had 1 from yesterday, I think. Yes.
Yeah. So what we've got at the end of round 2, we have Kata on 2. We have several people on 1.5. So that's Harriet, Zoe, and Audrey, and then Ketty and Neve and Anusha have 1.
Yes. Are you being slightly presumptuous? Are Lindsay and Audrey still?
They're all finished. Everything's finished.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
on chess result. I'm looking on chess results. They're all finished.
Oh, okay. They obviously forgot to.
So sorry. So yeah. So Audrey won.
She'd resigned, but yes,
the
ending we thought was very obvious. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Right. Well,
so we're actually back this afternoon, aren't we?
We are, but I feel quite sort of encouraged by what great chess we've had. Actually, it's been really
lovely.
Sort of tiring, but in a nice way.
Yeah.
Commentating for 4 hours on that was really good, actually.
It was fantastic chess.
It was great.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see Kata playing one of the people on 1.5. So that's Harriet, Audrey, or Zoe. And we'll
okay. And
we'll see very shortly. So a a.
Well, I guess that if there were only 4 players in that group, I don't know how they pair first. But I mean, Harriet and Zoe have obviously still played, so I don't know if that makes it more likely that one of those 2 will play on board 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah, not sure exactly how.
Anyway, it was a very, very interesting game.
Yeah. And anyway, whichever way it goes, all these players are very likely to play each other at some point during the tournament. So I think, kind of who you play exactly on which rounds isn't. Yeah, all the top players are going to end up playing each other. So we've got a lot of exciting chess lined up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, brilliant. We're gonna stop here, and we will be back for this afternoon's round. So I hope that you can join us then. And thank you all very much for watching.
Yep, thanks a lot. Okay, see you later.